Chapter 59. That day, Hien was once again in the limelight. On the way back, Hien even ran into Wang Ba, who was hiding in the crowd. He was there to watch Hien and Jiang Jiao compete. He wanted to leave after watching, but unfortunately, Hien saw him. Hien greeted him from afar. "Brother Wang." Under everyone's gaze, Wang Ba's face darkened. He braced himself and called out "boss" in a voice as soft as a mosquito's buzz. Hien looked at him with a smile. He turned around and left as if someone was chasing him from behind. He go. You're really something," Xiao Mai said enviously. "Things like this will happen more often in the future. You have to get used to it." Hien stood on his tiptoes and rubbed Xiao Mai's head. Hong Shan saw this and snorted. "You still want to be his boss. You should grow taller first." Hien shrugged. Man proposes, God disposes. Growing taller was something that couldn't be forced. Perhaps because he was in a good mood, Hien had a dream when he went back to sleep after secretly practicing as usual. In the dream, she was standing on the high platform of the martial arts arena. Everyone around her was calling her boss. Cheng Lisu ran over and said to her with a smile, "Brother He, you've entered the 9 Flags Battalion." "Really?" She was very happy. Then, she heard a voice, "He Rufei?" She turned around and saw Xiao Ju. He stared at her coldly and said sarcastically, "Are you Hien or He Rufei?" "He Rufei." When she heard this name, she suddenly woke up from her dream. She sat up and touched her head. She was already sweating profusely. The sky was bright outside. Hong Shan opened the window and saw her wiping her sweat. He said casually, "It's been so hot these days. I think it's going to rain soon. After a few rounds of rain, the weather will turn cold. Damn it, I don't want to spend the summer in the Liangzhou Guards anymore. I've lost a layer of skin from the heat." Hien smiled, but he was still a little uneasy. Seeing this, Xiao Mai asked curiously, He Ge doesn't look well. Is he suffering from the heat? Would you like some tea leaves?" "No, it's just hot." Hien got out of bed and put on his shoes. "I'll be fine after I sweat it out." After the morning run, he went to the training field to practice martial arts. Today, he was going to practice his saber techniques. As he practiced, a group of people walked over and stopped in front of Hien. Hien put down the knife in his hand. "Do you mean what you said yesterday?" the leader asked in a deep voice. This was a bald man with dragon eyebrows, leopard neck, and iron bones. He wore a string of Buddhist beads around his neck. The Buddhist beads shone with a dark light, and each bead was the size of a finger. His hands were holding a large saber with a golden back. He was a lot older than Hien. He must have passed the age of 40, perhaps he had already reached the mandate of heaven. However, he didn't look the slightest bit relaxed or tired. He was like a taut bear. "My name is Huang Xiong," the bald man said in a muffled voice. "I want to compare notes on saber techniques with you." The surrounding recruits who were eavesdropping on their conversation suddenly became excited. "Ah, there's someone. So soon, there's someone. I told you, there are tens of thousands of heroes in the Liangzhou Guards. How could we not find someone to teach this kid a lesson? Yes. Destroy his prestige and avenge our biscuit. I think Hien won't be able to maintain his prestige this time. Look at the saber in Huang Xiong's hand. It's not an ordinary weapon. I'm afraid he used to be a ranger." Hien also noticed the saber in Huang Xiong's hand. The body of the saber was red, the back of the saber was extremely thick, the blade was sharp, and the tip was flat and slightly curved. This kind of saber was very heavy. An ordinary person would find it difficult to wield it. However, it was perfect for a hero like Huang Xiong to wield. "You have a good saber," Hien praised. Hearing this, Huang Xiong's gaze softened slightly. He said, "It's an old friend of mine for 30 years. Hien was speechless. He couldn't help but think of his own Qingling sword. She was now a new recruit, and came out in a hurry. She wasn't like Huang Xiong who brought his saber to Liangzhou. She wasn't used to not having a suitable weapon. At this time, she was very envious of Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong saw that Hien didn't respond. He frowned and said, "Didn't you say yesterday that you wouldn't refuse anyone? Are you not going to accept the challenge now?" Hian was surprised for a moment. He smiled and said, "No, I'm a man of my words. I can do it now." Under everyone's gaze, she calmly walked up to the high platform of the training field. Below the platform, Liang Ping looked at Hian's movements with a numb expression. Du Mao leaned against a tree and said gloatingly, "Hian, your subordinate, really knows how to stir up trouble." Liang Ping wanted to go up and slap Hian. If Du Mao hadn't been so meddlesome yesterday and suggested that Jiang Jiao and Hian fight, Hian wouldn't have gone to the training field. He wouldn't have said such nonsense like setting up the arena. Today's events wouldn't have happened. Now that even Chief Instructor Shen had tacitly agreed to it, Liang Ping couldn't stop it. He could only pray silently in his heart that Hian would be blessed by good luck today and that he would be able to pass the day peacefully. Cheng Lisu stayed in Xiao Ju's room. He was bored to death and was scribbling on the small table. His uncle was reading a book sent from Beijing. He didn't know what it was, but he didn't stop reading it the whole morning. Cheng Lisu felt a little bored. He was thinking about whether he should go out and look at the training field to find some entertainment for himself. Someone knocked on the door. Xiao Ju said, "Come in." It was Shen Han who came in. Shen Han walked to Xiao Ju's side and whispered a few words to Xiao Ju. Cheng Lisu moved his chair to the other side and tried his best to listen. He heard a few words. Hian, Huang Xiong sword duel training field. For the first time, Cheng Lisu's brain, which had always been slow, came into use. He thought for a moment and understood what was going on. Someone wanted to compete with Hian in the saber, and that person was in the martial arts arena right now. He suddenly became excited. His brother was indeed worthy of his title. Yesterday, he said that someone would come to challenge him today. He wanted to go and see now. Cheng Lisu secretly put down the pen and paper in his hand. While Xiao Ju's back was facing him, he gave Shen Han a look and tiptoed out of the room. When he reached the door, Xiao Ju said lightly, "Cheng Lisu." Cheng Lisu was speechless. He answered with a sullen face. He felt strange in his heart. His uncle didn't have more eyes than others, so why was he always caught every time he wanted to do something? Cheng Lisu jogged to Xiao Ju and said shyly, "Uncle, I'm just going to take a look. My brother is having a sword duel with someone. How can I not go? I have to be loyal. I'll come back to practice my calligraphy after I'm done. I promise I won't be late." Xiao Ju looked up at him. "Did I say you can't go?"
Ha!
Cheng Lisu suddenly smiled. "Why didn't you say so earlier? I'll go then." He turned around and was about to run away. Xiao Ju said, "Wait." Cheng Lisu looked at him suspiciously. Cheng Lisu stood up and walked out with Shen Han. "I'll go too." Cheng Lisu was stunned. "Isn't your brother going to enter the Nine Flags Battalion?" The young man smiled. "I also want to see how he plans to enter the Nine Flags Battalion." Chapter 60. Hian was thinking seriously in front of the weapon rack beside the high platform in the martial arts practice field. She didn't use many knives in the past, so it was really inconvenient. Most of the knives on the weapon rack were willow leaf knives and large ring knives, which weren't very convenient for her. She thought about it again and again, then reached out and picked up a small knife on the lowest shelf. The recruits who were staring at her movements were all stunned when they saw this. Those who didn't understand asked, "Why is this knife so small? It's not even as long as a person's arm." Jiang Jiao was very knowledgeable. Upon seeing this, he said, "This is a pair of mandarin duck blades. It's not just one blade." The mandarin duck knives were indeed not big, only as long as a person's forearm. The two knives were sealed in the same scabbard and could be hidden in sleeves or boots. The blade was wide and thick, only a few inches in front of the tip of the knife, making it easy to backhand and block. Hian slowly pulled the knives out of the scabbard. One was slightly longer and the other was slightly shorter. Because very few people usually used mandarin duck knives, the knives were actually quite new. "Not bad," she praised in her heart. She played with it in her hand and felt that it was okay. Wang Ba also came to the bottom of the platform and saw the mandarin duck knives in Hian's hand. He was stunned for a moment and said, "He actually uses mandarin duck knives?" Huang Xiong on the platform was also puzzled. He saw Hien pick the knives again and again. After picking this one, he looked at Hien differently and asked, "Double knives?" Hien nodded. "Double knives. I didn't expect you to know how to use double knives at such a young age." Huang Xiong said, "You really know everything." Hien answered humbly, "It's all forced by life." The people below didn't feel good when they heard this. Du Mao reached out and touched Liang Ping. What does Hien's family do? Forced by life. How can he be proficient in all 18 kinds of martial arts? Was he kidnapped when he was young and became a street performer? You're asking me, but who should I ask? Liang Ping said angrily. He even knew how to use Mandarin duck knives. Who would use Mandarin duck knives in a decent family? Most Mandarin duck knives were used by the underworld. What kind of person was this? Without another word, Huang Xiong slowly drew his long saber from its scabbard and nodded slightly at Hien. "Brother He, please enlighten me." Hien thought to himself, how could it be little brother? Even if she was 19 years old in her previous life, she should still call Huang Xiong uncle. Now, Chung Lisu called him big brother. If he followed Chung Lisu, he should call Xiao Ju uncle. Now, he called Xiao Ju uncle, but Huang Xiong big brother? Huang Xiong was old enough to be a Xiao Ju's father. As she was thinking this, Xiao Mai below the stage cried out, "Ahiga, be careful." Then she saw Huang Xiong rushing over with a knife. The golden-backed broadsword was wielded vigorously by this big man. He tilted the tip of the sword to the left and slightly shifted his right foot. He turned around and slashed at Hien. Hien was startled. She crouched down to avoid the attack and used the back of her saber to push the tip of the opponent's saber away. With the kite saber in front and the Mandarin duck knife behind, she also closed in on Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong's brute strength was great. With a heavy swing, he knocked away Hien's saber. Hien aimed at him and threw her saber. Huang Xiong tilted his head to avoid it. Hien flipped over and raised her head to catch the throwing saber. The two of them retreated a few steps and were in a deadlock. They stared at each other. Huang Xiong was not Jiang Jiao. After all, Jiang Jiao was still young. Huang Xiong's saber had been with him for 30 years. The man and the saber had already formed an excellent tacit understanding. When they fought, Hien had already experienced that this man's skill was above hers. Hien had to end the fight quickly. Otherwise, she would be slapping her own face. Hien calculated in her heart. Huang Xiong's heart was also in turmoil. For so many years, he had fought with thousands of people. Some were good, some were bad. But this youngster was so young. Just now, he threw and caught the saber smoothly and smoothly. How did he do it? Did he start using a saber when he was 3 years old? Hien thought that Huang Xiong was tall and sturdy. His saber technique was fierce but clumsy. He lost because he was not nimble enough. It seemed that her choice of the Mandarin duck knife was just right. This way, she could defeat him in terms of speed. Her eyes moved slightly. "Continue," she shouted and stepped forward to meet him. Huang Xiong held the saber in his right hand. He took a diagonal step to the left and thrust his saber straight at Hien. Hien's Mandarin duck knife stabbed forward and clashed with him. Although she looked thin and small, her strength was not weak. The two sabers stuck together, but Hien still had another saber. She twirled the other saber, bent her elbow and raised the back of the saber above her head. She stabbed at Huang Xiong. Huang Xiong could not dodge in time. A corner of his clothes was cut off. In a split second, the audience in the martial arts arena cried out in alarm. From this moment on, everyone discovered that Hien's movements began to become faster. Her footwork was extremely nimble. One saber went to entangle Huang Xiong's golden broadsword. The other saber was like a snake waiting for an opportunity to strike. Although Huang Xiong was not stabbed by her, he could no longer gain an advantage. The single saber was fierce, the double sabers were nimble. Using softness to overcome hardness, the weak to overcome the strong. You just asked me to teach you. I just remembered that our double sabers have a song formula. Unexpectedly, she still had time to talk. I'll read it to you. Huang Xiong stared blankly. She took advantage of the opportunity to throw her sharp saber at him again. The north wind in June gives birth to two arms, using both left and right as one. She held a long saber in each hand. Her posture was elegant. Two arms intertwined before my eyes. Later than Yu Yang obtaining the lone sword. The long sabers danced, making it difficult for people to see the youth's expression. They could only hear his laughter. Using one hand alone, swift as lightning. Only the position of the clapper has been learned. She pressed forward step by step, but did not panic. Only knowing that the former saber is not enough, using both left and right is trivial. The saber swept toward Huang Xiong's neck. Huang Xiong narrowly avoided it. Using the sword today, using the right saber. Obtaining the position of the clapper, using the left. One left, one right. She used them skillfully and freely. He only felt that the saber was her hand. Her hand was like the blade. On the martial arts arena, she was chanting and dancing. Corresponding to her neither fast nor slow voice, her movements were as fast as lightning. The clashing of sabers and sabers made a clanging sound. It made people's hearts clench. When Chung Lisu and the others came over, they saw this scene. "Uncle, look, I told you my big brother will win," he shouted excitedly. His shout attracted the attention of the people around him. Someone recognized Xiao Ju and immediately shouted excitedly, "It's Commander-in-Chief, Military Governor Xiao. General Fengyan has come to the martial arts arena." General Fengyan? With that said, the recruits' eyes were instantly attracted to Xiao Ju. The noise spread to the martial arts arena. He Yan's ears twitched. "Xiao Ju?" She turned her head to look. Sure enough, not far from the martial arts arena, standing next to Shen Han and Chung Lisu, was Xiao Ju. The youth was wearing a dark blue robe embroidered with red-crowned cranes. He had a graceful bearing and a picturesque face. He did not look like a picture scroll with the recruits who filled the martial arts arena. This side was rough and deep, while his side was bright and clear. He Yan could not see his expression clearly because they were too far apart. Presumably, he also had an indifferent and aloof appearance. She did not expect that Xiao Ju would personally come to watch her compete. Did this mean that her performance yesterday had finally reached the ears of the people who should have heard of it? Did Xiao Ju notice that she was such an outstanding talent? "Big brother, be careful." While she was thinking, she heard Chung Lisu's exclamation. She looked up and saw that the golden saber was already in front of her. Chapter 61. The sharp edge of the blade was right in front of his eyes, and there seemed to be a faint smell of blood. This scene fell into the eyes of the audience, and they all burst into exclamations. Liang Ping couldn't help but blur out, "Be careful." Saber techniques were different from spear techniques. Spear techniques were more dangerous than crossbow techniques, and saber techniques were more dangerous than spear techniques. If he wasn't careful, he would bleed. Moreover, Huang Xiong was too strong. If he couldn't hold back his saber, he would be in trouble. This kid was usually careless, but how could he be distracted at a time like this? Liang Ping was anxious. Being distracted during a saber competition was a big taboo. Huang Xiong saw this opportunity and immediately slashed at Hian. Seeing that he couldn't dodge, and the saber was about to reach his neck, the youth suddenly raised his head and revealed a sly smile. "Oh no," Huang Xiong thought to himself. Just as he was about to withdraw his saber, Hian's saber in his left hand had already reached his long saber, and the saber in his right hand had already circled behind him. In a panic, Huang Xiong bent his body to avoid, but he saw the youth's smile widen. When he withdrew his hands, both sabers were in his hands. The Mandarin duck double saber slashed at Huang Xiong's head. Huang Xiong wanted to reach out to block, but it was too late. The blade stopped in front of his forehead, but because of the sharp edge, a small wound appeared on his forehead, and a trace of blood flowed out. The audience was silent. After a while, Hian withdrew his saber from his side, took out a wrinkled handkerchief, and handed it to him. "Thank you for letting me win." Huang Xiong looked at Hian's handkerchief but didn't take it. Instead, he asked, "Just now, You weren't distracted. Was that a trick? All's fair in war. Hien smiled. What do you think? She had been doing things for so many years, so of course she knew that she couldn't let her guard down at any time. She had to be even more focused during a competition. Just now, even if the emperor came, she wouldn't have been shaken, let alone Xiao Ju. However, Huang Xiong's swordsmanship was exquisite. She wasn't good at using swords. If she didn't use some tricks, how could she win so easily? It was just a deliberate distraction to lure Huang Xiong into the trap, but it turned out to be the mantis stalking the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. Speaking of which, she was quite smart. Xiao Ju probably wouldn't have thought that the person he called stupid back then had already learned how to use his wits and wit. Thinking of this, Hien proudly looked down the stage, wanting to see if Xiao Ju was looking at him with adoration. However, when she looked around, Xiao Ju was nowhere to be seen. Even Shan Han was nowhere to be seen. Only Cheng Lisu was waving at her excitedly, waving his hairband. He left just like that. Hien stared blankly. Then did he see her charm or not? Before she could figure it out, a large group of people surrounded her with a whoosh sound. She had been in the limelight again today. Half of the Liang Province Guard's recruits were completely convinced by her. Her bow, spear, and swordsmanship were all so exquisite. She was like a crane in a flock of chickens. However, half of the people couldn't stand her arrogance. They only said, only using schemes and tricks isn't the right way. If you have the ability, fight fair and square. It's because you know you can't beat your opponent that you have to resort to trickery. That only shows that she's smart. Someone retorted. Wang Ba mixed in with the recruits and walked out. His heart was filled with complicated feelings. On one hand, he hoped that Hien would keep winning. This would show that Hien was a true powerhouse. It was understandable that he lost to a powerhouse. After all, no one in the Liang Province Guards could beat him. However, on the other hand, Wang Ba wasn't satisfied. Why did so many people lose to Hien? Why did he have to call Hien boss? Why? However, when he thought about it, Huang Xiong was already in his 40s. Losing to a 16-year-old youth seemed to be a bit worse than losing to him. When he thought of this, Wang Ba felt a bit better. He temporarily let out a breath of turbid air. In the forest at the foot of Liang Province's White Moon Mountain, two people were walking slowly. The vegetation in the forest was dense, blocking out the sunlight. It was cool and refreshing. There were also birds chirping. White Moon Mountain was the best in terms of scenery. You just watched the competition on the martial arts stage, Xiao Ju said. What do you think? Shan Han thought carefully for a moment, thought again and again, then opened his mouth to say, Liang Ping took in a good soldier. Hien is a good seedling. To be able to reach such a level in bow, spear, and saber techniques, one must be a rare talent. It's really not easy for him to be like this. You can't find a second person like him in this batch of recruits. How's his swordsmanship? Xiao Ju asked again. From the looks of it, Hien's swordsmanship isn't as skillful as Huang Xiong's. His advantage lies in his nimble footwork, lively mind, and flexible mind. He knows how to use tactics, Shen Han answered. Hien's shortcomings were very obvious. If this competition had been dragged on for another 15 minutes, Hien would have been at a disadvantage. He probably knew this himself, so he pretended to be distracted and caused Huang Xiong to impulsively attack. In the end, he defeated Huang Xiong. What do you think of him joining the Nine Flags Battalion? Xiao Ju asked carelessly. This youth is so young, but he's already scheming. He doesn't show off his bravado. He's also skilled in archery and horse riding. His martial arts are outstanding, and I heard that he can read. If we were to choose him from this batch of recruits, he would be the best choice, Shen Han said carefully. You think so too? Xia Ju turned around. Her tone was non-committal. Shen Han observed the young man's expression. Xiao family's young commander-in-chief had always been expressionless. At this moment, his expression was calm and nothing could be seen. However, Shen Han felt that he didn't seem to agree with his opinion. Commander-in-chief, do you think there's something wrong with him? There's something wrong with this person, Xiao Ju said. Shun Han was stunned. Today, he competed with swordsmanship. His swordsmanship wasn't considered skillful, but the footwork he used was trained by the infantry of the assault battalion. When the infantry of the assault battalion entered the battlefield, they would rush to the front at any time. Because they might die, their footwork was extremely flexible. When He Yan competed with Huang Xiong, his swordsmanship wasn't as good as Huang Xiong's, but he dodged every one of Huang Xiong's attacks. He could tell at a glance that his subconscious dodging and retreating was from the assault battalion. He Yan probably noticed it himself. He was afraid that others would find out, so he deliberately changed it. However, sometimes one wouldn't remember every subconscious move. This, Shun Han said. How is this possible? He's only 16. Has he already been on the battlefield before? It's because it's impossible that there's something wrong with him, Xiao Ju said. Now that the situation was tense, Shun Han had to be cautious. He hesitated for a moment and asked Xiao Ju, Commander-in-Chief, what should we do now? I want to test this person, Xiao Ju replied. Commander-in-Chief, how do you plan to test him? Didn't he set up an arena in the martial arts arena? 1 match a day, and he'll win every match. Tomorrow, pick 3 instructors and compete with him in riding and shooting. Shun Han was stunned. He hesitated for a moment. That's not good, right? If he wins. If He Yan won, what would the recruits think of their instructors? They couldn't even beat a soldier. Xiao Ju stopped in his tracks and said calmly, if he wins, there's definitely something wrong with him. There's no such genius in the world. Even if there was, it wouldn't appear in the Liang province guards. Chapter 62. On this day, Hian was surrounded by the new recruits who came to befriend her until midnight. She had promised many people to teach them her swordsmanship, but she was only able to do so in the middle of the night. Because it was too late, she did not plan to go to the martial arts field to train at night. Xiao Mai lay facing her with one hand behind her head. Her eyes were bright as she said to her, He is so impressive today. Tell me, Hian muttered to herself for a while, then said, when I was sparring with Uncle Huang today, did military governor Xiao finish watching? She was still thinking about Xiao Ju during the day. How could Xiao Ju leave without watching her exquisite swordsmanship? Wouldn't that be a waste of her efforts? Perhaps Xiao Ju thought that her swordsmanship was so ordinary that it was not worth her attention? Xiao Mai did not expect Hian to ask about this. She tried hard to recall, then said, the governor came for a while, then left. But you were too nervous at the end of the sparring session. We were all watching you, so we didn't see when he left. He should have finished watching, right? Hian turned over worriedly. Do you really want the governor to see it? Xiao Mai asked. Of course, I want to learn martial arts and sell it to the imperial family. I have to sell it first. He didn't even watch it. How would he know that I'm the best in the Liang province guards? Hong Shan's slow voice came from the other side. Now that your reputation as the best in the Liang province guards has spread far and wide, don't worry. In a few days, there will be people looking for you to compete in this and that. There will be countless opportunities like this. Military Governor Xiao will see it one day. That's good, Hian thought to himself, then closed his eyes. Hong Shan was right. Early the next morning, right after the weight-bearing run, before he could go to the martial arts field to practice his crossbow, Liang Ping walked in front of Hian. Come here. Hian didn't know what was going on, so he followed them. When he reached the long path behind the training field, he saw 2 people leading 3 horses towards them. Hian also remembered their faces. They were both instructors of the Liangzhou Guards Institution. One of them was called Du Mao, and he often came to talk to Liang Ping. The other was a short old man with grizzled hair. His name was Ma Damei. Liang Jiao, this is... Hian did not understand. Could it be that he wanted her to be a coach because she was very outstanding? How could a recruit be an instructor? This wasn't the way to get promoted. Besides, she didn't want to be an instructor in the Liang Province Guard. Fortunately, Liang Ping's words put her at ease. Liang Ping said, "Didn't you say on the martial arts platform a few days ago that you could accept any challenge from the Liang Province Guard and that you would win every single one of them?" Although Hien did not understand what he meant, he still nodded and replied, "That's right. Then today, the three of us will compete with you in horseback archery." Du Mao stepped forward and handed the reins to Hien. "Let's compete now." Huh? Hien was slightly surprised. "You want to compete with me?" She had set up this arena to make a name for herself among the recruits. She had never thought about becoming an instructor. What's wrong with these instructors? They're not young men. Why are they so hot-headed that they want to compete with me? Are they plotting something? Her wary gaze fell into their eyes. That thin old man with grizzled hair, Ma Damei, smiled and said, "What's wrong? Young man, are you afraid to compete with us instructors? I thought you had guts. You're scared just because of this?" Ma Damei's face was full of wrinkles when he smiled, but it was not ugly. Instead, it was as amiable as a family elder. However, Hien knew that this person was not as amiable as he appeared to be. From what he heard, every word and sentence was meant to provoke her. However, since she had already said so much, if she really didn't go, she would be known as a coward. Xiao Ju was someone who couldn't tolerate sand in his eyes, so he probably wouldn't let her go to the Nine Flags Battalion. Thinking of this, she laughed heartily.
"How could that be?"
"I'm just afraid that I'll embarrass myself in front of you instructors, so I'm a bit hesitant. Since you instructors are willing to teach me, how could I not appreciate your kindness? Let's compete. One match it is." Liang Ping and the other two looked at each other and nodded. Okay. Hien was now a famous person in the Liang Province Guards. Whenever there was a disturbance, everyone would know about it. Once the news that the three instructors wanted to compete with Hien in riding and archery came out, all of the recruits immediately went crazy. They wanted to go and watch, but were stopped by their instructors and only allowed to train in the martial arts field. Naturally, this was Shun Han's arrangement. Although Xiao Ju only said that they wanted to test Hien, they could not use the reputation of all of the Liang Province Guards as a test. It was better to be safe than sorry. If Hien won, then in the future, would the recruits obey Hien or their instructors?
It was hard to say.
Therefore, it was better to hide. The recruits could not go and watch the show. Cheng Su, who was not a recruit, could not either. He was locked in a room in the Liang Province Guards. There were also guards outside, so he could not go out. He did not know that Hien was going to compete in riding and archery. When he was suddenly locked up, he thought that something had happened to the Liang Province Guards. He pounded on the door and said, "What happened? Is there a riot? Why can't you let me go out? Uncle, why are you locking me up?" The emotionless voice of the guard came from outside. "Young master, the governor said that you have to finish copying the Zhao Mingwen anthology 3 times before you can go out. I think you want me to die. Why don't you just kill me?" Cheng Su sat down in front of the table angrily. 3 times? He would not be able to finish copying in a month. Outside, Shen Han and Xiao Ju were walking out. Shen Han looked behind him and said, "Young Master Cheng seems to like Hien a lot. If Hien really has a problem, is it possible that he has other motives for approaching young Master Cheng?" "It's very possible," Xiao Ju said. Cheng Su was the one who told him about the Nine Flags Battalion. Shen Han was silent for a moment before saying, "If that's the case, then it's really bad." There were actually people with ulterior motives among the recruits of the Liang Province Guards. Hien was one of them, but he was definitely not the only one. If there were other people, they would be in a very passive position. What was even more frightening was that they did not know anything about this. If Xiao Ju did not happen to be here this time and saw that Hien's movements were different, the entire Liang Province Guards would have become someone else's property. As the two of them spoke, they had already reached the side of the horse path in the martial arts field. Hien and the other 3 people were standing at the end of the path, each holding a horse. First it was Liang Ping, then Du Mao, then Ma Damei, and finally Hien. They all mounted their horses. Hien stood at the furthest side, and her horse was also the smallest. Probably to take care of her figure, she flipped onto the horse. Her movements were skillful. She held the reins in one hand and carried a quiver and longbow on her back. Her majestic appearance did not seem like the weak young man that they usually saw. Hien did not even have a riding suit. The sunlight shone on his red clothes, gilding his delicate features with a layer of special, heroic spirit. Hien had a smile on his lips. His appearance of a golden saber and armored horse actually resembled the stunning charm of a young general. Shen Han stole a glance at Xiao Ju beside him. The latter's expression was lazy and indifferent. He did not know what she was thinking, but Shen Han knew that for a moment, Hien was actually a little similar to him. Chapter 63. Liang Jiao, you still haven't told me. How do we compete in horseback archery? Hien looked at Liang Ping, who was beside him. Do we compete in who has more game? Or who can reach the end of the track first? Before Liang Ping could speak, Ma Damei spoke first. He smiled and said, "Young man, in the time it takes for a stick of incense to burn, we will run a lap around here. This is the starting point and also the end. There is a grass target at the bend of the track ahead. The four of us have different feather arrows, so we will shoot at the bend. Whoever finishes shooting and returns to this point first will win." Hien listened and nodded. Okay. Liang Ping couldn't help but look at him. The sentence this young man said the most was, okay. Whether it was to Wang Ba, Jiang Jiao, or Huang Xiong, or now to these instructors, he still said, okay. They didn't know when he would say no. Then let's start. Du Mao pulled the reins. Someone behind him blew a horn. The four horses were like arrows leaving the bowstring. In the blink of an eye, they were more than 10 meters away, leaving only billowing smoke behind. Hien's horse was much more obedient than the one she had at the capital's drill ground. His sway must have been specially trained by someone. She only needed to give a few instructions, and the horse would understand. She also noticed that among the other three instructors, although Liang Ping and Du Mao's equestrian skills were good, they were not as good as the ordinary-looking Ma Damei. Ma Damei's equestrian skills were on par with hers. Perhaps she was better, but she didn't show it. She observed the three instructors, and the others were also observing her. Du Mao glanced over, and his eyes almost popped out. Hien didn't use a horsewhip? She wrapped the horsewhip around her arm and commanded the horse to gallop. However, she used her hand to gently pat the horse's body. This wasn't the capital's young master going on a scenic tour. What was he doing? The most surprising thing was that he was so casual that he didn't fall behind the instructors. He was running neck and neck with Du Mao. He even had the mood to smile at Du Mao. Du Mao immediately turned his head away. The steed galloped like a shooting star and arrived at the bend in the blink of an eye. Hien reached for the quiver on his back, took out several arrows, and was about to shoot at the grass targets on both sides. This target was not as big as the one at the training field. It was only the size of a palm and was not obvious. If one used a crossbow, it would not be easy to hit it. It also depended on the person's eyesight and movements. Just as Hien was about to shoot, Liang Ping and Du Mao looked at each other. One in front, the other behind, they suddenly exerted their strength. The two horses squeezed toward Hien's side, pushing Hien's horse to one side, so that the arrow in his hand could not be shot. Hien was jolted a few times by the frightened horse, and hastily pulled on the reins to steady himself. She looked at Liang Ping and Du Mao. The two of them were shooting arrows as if nothing had happened. Du Mao even said to her, "Hien, you have to be careful. Don't fall." It was as if they weren't the ones who had just touched her. Hien raised his eyebrows. Really, on the competition field, she never understood the word forgive. They disturbed her archery. How could she just let it go like that? Liang Ping and Du Mao had already shot their arrows, but they saw a green arrow shoot out from the side. With a dong sound, the arrow was cut in half. The arrow changed direction and fell to the ground. The two of them looked at Hien at the same time. Hien shrugged and said, "Instructor, why do you look like you're not very skilled?" Liang Ping. This young man was too vengeful. His mouth was also unforgiving. He was really arrogant. Hien was about to shoot again, but before she could pull out the arrow, her body jolted again. The old man, Ma Damii, had already caught up from behind. He smiled at Hien and said, "Young man, don't be anxious.
Take your time."
Hien couldn't draw the bow. As soon as she moved, the three of them would follow from behind, from the front, from the left and right, and touch her as if nothing had happened. The horses were frequently frightened, so she couldn't aim at the bull's eye. After a few times, Hien could see that the three instructors were deliberately opposing her. Although she didn't understand why, it was probably part of the competition. If they wanted her to be unable to shoot, even if she returned to the end of the track first, it wouldn't be considered a victory. She was outnumbered. Moreover, this was a competition of archery. She couldn't fight with these instructors. However, Hien couldn't just let it go like this. Hien's eyes moved slightly. She muttered, "Want to scheme against me? No way." She suddenly raised her arm. The horsewhip wrapped around her arm uncoiled and fell in the wind, making a crisp sound. Du Mao frowned. From the beginning to the end, Hien hadn't used the horsewhip. It was rare to see someone who could skillfully ride a horse without a horsewhip. But now that Hien was doing this, could it be that she couldn't handle it and had to use the horsewhip again? Hien was thinking when suddenly, she raised her head and smiled at him. Du Mao had a bad premonition. The next moment, he saw the horsewhip flying towards him. Du Mao was shocked and instinctively dodged. Hien actually dared to hurt people. When he moved sideways, the quiver behind him was exposed in front of everyone. The horsewhip didn't fall on Du Mao's body. Instead, it wrapped around the arrows in the quiver. Hien stretched out her hand and pulled. The horsewhip loosened in midair, and the arrows fell into the wind. Liang Ping, who witnessed the whole process, was stunned. Before he could react, Hien's horsewhip was aimed at him. He was shocked and hurriedly urged his horse to dodge. But this time, it was Hien's turn to attack. How could he escape? With a pull and a hook, all the arrows in his quiver were thrown to the ground. Du Mao's face was livid. "I think the instructors don't want me to shoot." Hien didn't seem to see his ugly face. She smiled and said, "But I don't want to lose. There's no other way. Let's stop shooting. Whoever runs faster wins, right?" Ha ha ha. Ma Damii's laughter came from behind. He didn't have a trace of nervousness or anger. Instead, he was full of interest. "You're quite smart. I wonder if you'll take my arrows?" Hien smiled. "How can I? I don't intend to take your arrows." Ma Damii's equestrian skills were excellent. It was difficult for her to touch his arrows. But it didn't matter. As long as there was no target to shoot at, he could only compete with her to reach the finish line first. She and Ma Damii went side by side. When she shot an arrow, Ma Damii shot an arrow to block. When Ma Damii shot an arrow, Hien shot an arrow to block. The two of them had left Liang Ping and Du Mao behind. No one was faster than the other. Thus, in a stalemate, they passed the last bend. No one hit the target. Now, they could only compete to reach the finish line first. Ma Damii looked at Hien and smiled. "Young man, you're really good." He waved his horsewhip. Suddenly, the horse rushed forward. Just now, he didn't use all his skills. Hien looked at his back and praised, "There's really someone better than you." He squeezed the horse's belly and followed. Chapter 64. The horse was agile, its hooves stirred up the wind, and as fast as lightning, it galloped straight to the finish line. Hien and Ma Damii were neck and neck. If this continued, it would be hard to tell who would reach the finish line first. Liang Ping and Du Mao had already given up. They knew that their equestrian skills were not as good as the two in front of them, and they could not catch up. They simply strolled slowly behind them. Anyway, they had already done what Chief Instructor Shen asked them to do. Chief Instructor Shen called them out last night and asked them to compete with Hien in equestrian archery today. At first, Liang Ping and Du Mao both refused. They were not recruits, so why should they compete with Hien? But Chief Instructor insisted that they do this. He also asked them to create trouble for Hien as much as possible during the equestrian archery journey and not let Hien win. Liang Ping felt very uncomfortable. They wanted to compete with Hien, but they could not let Hien win. Wasn't this deliberately unfair? Comparing their instructor and the recruits was already bullying, and the three of them teamed up to deal with Hien. It was simply the worst kind of bullying. Who knew that man proposes, God disposes? Not to mention the three of them, he and Du Mao did not bully Hien. Instead, they were bullied by Hien. Fortunately, the recruits did not see it. If they saw it, where would they put their old faces? But among the three of them, Ma Damei was an expert in equestrian skills. How would Hien compare with her? From afar, they could see the red silk cloth on the flagpole at the finish line. Hien pulled the reins, and the horse moved forward, half a step ahead of Ma Damei. She wanted to rush to the finish line, but at this time, Ma Damei shouted, "Little guy." Hien subconsciously looked at him. She saw the little old man standing upright with his 2 feet on the horse's back. He was very stable. She praised him in her heart. Then, the old man smiled at her, turned his body, and swept toward Hien. Hien was startled. He urged his horse to evade, but the old man was like a bat with wings. Half of his body was already hanging on Hien's horse. He even pursed his lips and reprimanded Hien for urging the horse to avoid him. "Young man, how can you be so unkind at such a young age? Do you want me to fall to my death?" Hien wanted to push Hien down, but this man had already taken over the magpie's nest, holding the reins firmly in his hand. He struck his palm toward Hien, intending to knock him down. This person was really full of confidence in her. Wasn't he afraid that something would happen to her if she fell? Hien cursed in his heart. He exchanged 2 more moves with him, but neither of them was able to gain an advantage. Ma Damei was also surprised. The dozens of instructors of the Liang State Guard all had their own strengths. Some of them were proficient in bows and crossbows, while others were proficient in foot encirclement. However, he was most proficient in horseback archery. Yesterday, Shun Han had asked him to compete with Hien today. At first, he thought Shun Han was crazy, but now, it seemed that this young man named Hien had greatly exceeded his expectations. His riding skills were exquisite, and his mind was nimble and decisive. He knew that it would be difficult for the three of them to hit the grass target, so he simply knocked away all of the other people's arrows. At this moment, the 2 moves he exchanged with him were not chaotic at all. It was as if he often exchanged blows with others in critical situations. He was very calm. Hien, on the other hand, was not as calm as he appeared. The instructors of the Liang State Guard weren't people who only knew how to eat and not do anything. This old man was truly difficult to deal with. Seeing that the finish line was too close, her goal was not to exchange blows with him, but to cross the finish line first. If this continued, even if the horse reached the finish line, with both her and the old man on the horse, who would win? How treacherous. When she raised her head, her face was also full of smiles, without a trace of displeasure. "Although I am young, I know how to respect my elders. You are already so old, yet you are still riding with me. If you fall, even 10,000 deaths would not be enough to absolve me of the blame. I'd better switch horses." As she spoke, she leaned forward and grabbed the iron ring on the horse's saddle with both hands. She leaned against the horse and let go. This move was truly beautiful. Ma Damei's eyes couldn't help but light up. Hien grabbed the iron ring with one hand and used the whip in his other hand to wrap around Ma Damei's empty horse not far away. When the 2 horses drew closer, Hien let go and half of his body jumped onto the other horse. He grabbed the reins and flipped himself onto the horse again.
Good, good, good.
Ma Damei said good 3 times in a row. She looked at Hien with undisguised admiration. However, he smiled and said, "But if you think you can win like this, you're still too inexperienced." Before she finished speaking, the horse under Hien's body violently struggled and refused to move forward. Instead, it stood on the spot as if it had gone mad. "This is my own horse. It recognizes its master. Young man, your horsemanship is not bad." But if the horse recognizes its master, you won't be able to control it. He laughed loudly, as if Hyan's move was exactly what he wanted. He was just waiting to see Hyan make a scene. The young man smiled slightly. His voice was not nervous at all. He calmly replied, "I'll still try. What if I can control it again?" After she finished speaking, she leaned over and put her lips close to the horse's ear. She didn't know what she was whispering, but the horse under her gradually calmed down after she tossed and turned. Ma Damii was stunned. He couldn't believe his eyes. He had seen thousands of horses. He also had simple communication with horses. However, he had never seen a horse that recognized its master obediently listen to just a few words. There were myths and legends in ancient times. There were people who understood the language of hundreds of animals. Hyan, was he one? He had lived for so long, but he had never believed in myths and legends. The young man pulled on the reins, and the horse galloped away. Ma Damii hurriedly followed. However, he had already missed the best opportunity while he was in a daze. The young man's words were still ringing in his ears. He had a smug expression on his face. "Instructor, your chance to beat me ends here." At the end of the horse path, Shun Han and Xiao Ju sat in a pavilion in the forest. Shun Han didn't touch the tea in his teacup at all. Xiao Ju, on the other hand, drank half a cup. He had a panoramic view of Hyan's fight with Ma Damii just now. Shun Han closed his eyes. A chill rose in his heart. Xiao Ju was right. It was impossible for such a genius to appear in the Liang province guards. She was first in every event and had surpassed all of his instructors. This wasn't a good thing. It was too strange. It was as if it was specially prepared for the Liang province guards. The red silk fluttered in the wind. The young man and his horse were like a gust of wind as they swept across the finish line. He reined in the horse and shouted for it to stop. Smoke and dust rose. Behind him was Ma Damii. She had a serious expression and didn't look relaxed. The two of them stopped one after the other. Hyan got off his horse first. After he got off, Ma Damii also got off her horse. She walked towards Ma Damii and stopped in front of her. "I didn't mean to tease you just now. I was forced by the situation. You won't hold it against me, right?" The young man looked anxious. Ma Damii was stunned for a moment. Then she smiled. "Young man, what are you talking about? It's a competition." A big smile appeared on the young man's face. She wiped the sweat on her forehead and thought for a moment. Then she said, "Then this time, thanks for letting me win. Thanks for letting me win." In other words, she won again. Chapter 65. Liang Ping and Du Mao, who were behind him, finally rushed back. The two of them got off their horses at the finish line and saw Hyan happily drinking water, while Ma Damii stood to the side, deep in thought. It didn't look like Ma Damii had won. The two of them thought at the same time, "It can't be, right? Even Ma Damii couldn't beat Hyan?" Liang Ping walked to Ma Damii's side. Ma Damii didn't wait for him to speak and said, "I lost." "She really lost?" Liang Ping was surprised. "How can that be? How could you lose to him?" Ma Damii was the best equestrian archer among their instructors. If Ma Damii couldn't beat Hyan, then didn't that mean that no one in the entire Liangzhou guard was better than Hyan in equestrian skills? Then why would Hyan come to learn equestrian archery? He could be his own instructor. "Did that brat trick you?" Du Mao asked in a low voice. "Did you fall for his tricks?" Hyan had just used his whip to deflect all of his arrows. Du Mao was angry just thinking about it. Look, was this really something a new recruit could do? Ma Damii glared at him. "I'm not as good as him, okay?" She walked to Hyan's side and asked Hyan, "Little girl, I have something to ask you." "Instructor, do you want to ask me what I said to your horse at the end so that it stopped going crazy and listened to me?" Hyan tightened his water bag. "If you want to ask about this, then forget it. It's an ancestral skill. I can't tell anyone." She winked at Ma Damii, then turned to Liang Ping and said, "Liang Jiaodou, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. I still have to go to the practice field to train." Liang Ping waved his hand. "Forget it. Out of sight, out of mind. Dumao looked at her back and felt that it was strange. She's still quite energetic after this run. She actually still has the strength to go to the practice field to train.
What kind of person is she?
He's different from you and me, Liang Ping answered grumpily. I've made a fool of myself in front of you. Shen Han was a little embarrassed. All of his instructors had been defeated by He Yan, and this was under the condition that he had used some tricks. If the three of them couldn't defeat him even after joining forces, it would be somewhat inexcusable. It's nothing. You did well. Xiao Ju lowered her eyes and sipped her tea. We didn't ask you to compete in equestrian archery. We just wanted to test the candidates. Now, the candidates have been tested. Does the commander-in-chief still think that there's something wrong with him?
Shen Han asked.
Yes. Because He Yan is too outstanding? If it was because of this, it could only be regarded as suspicion. There was no evidence. Xiao Ju put down the teacup in her hand. The way he rode the horse at the end is from the barbarian tribe. Barbarian tribes? Shen Han suddenly stood up. The barbarians included the Western Chang, the Southern barbarians, and the current Wutua kingdom. When the Western Chang rebellion was quelled by General Fei Hong, Xiao Ju personally expelled the Southern barbarian tribe when they invaded. Now, Yudo was ready to make a move. The barbarian tribe and Wei had always been like fire and water. Even the Western Chang and Southern barbarian tribe had a subtle relationship. Could she be a barbarian? Not necessarily. Xiao Ju shook her head. Did you bring the military registry? Shen Han presented the registry. He Yan's is here. Since this person is different, we can't act rashly and alert him. Pay attention to his every move and be careful. Commander-in-Chief, are you thinking of casting a long line to catch a big fish? We have to catch the person behind it, he replied calmly. After Shen Han left, Xiao Ju flipped through the registry in her hand. Her gaze lingered on He Yan's page for a long time. After a while, she said, Fei knew someone quietly appeared behind her like a shadow and said in a low voice, Young master, send someone to check if there is a son called He Yan in the He family of the capital's gate guard. Fei Nu accepted the order and was about to leave when Xiao Ju called him again. Check again. See if the He family and Su Jingfu have any secret dealings. When He Yan returned to the martial arts practice field, a large group of people who had been waiting anxiously surrounded him. How was it? How was it? What was the result? Why don't I see instructor and the others? Did you win, or did instructor win? He Yan smiled and said, It's a secret. This answer obviously did not satisfy everyone's curiosity. However, He Yan's lips were sealed tightly, and no one could pry open his mouth. Everyone left resentfully and speculated among themselves.
He should have won, right?
He Yan doesn't look like he lost. This was someone who believed in her. Since he won, why didn't he say it openly? If he didn't say it, he must have lost and was afraid of losing face. This was someone who did not believe in her. You won't get a result even if you argue. If He Yan doesn't want to say it, you can ask the instructor. This was someone who thought it through calmly. Therefore, when the instructors arrived, everyone swarmed towards the instructors like a swarm of bees. The instructors were confused at first, but when they heard that they were being asked about the results of the competition, they all looked towards He Yan at the same time. They thought that this kid was kind and knew to leave some face for the instructor and did not expose him. The instructor waved their hands and said, Don't ask anymore. Disperse. In the end, they did not say anything. When He Yan went to bed that night, Xiaomai was still thinking about the result. She asked He Yan, Higa, so what was the result? The result is not important. He Yan patted Xiaomai's head and said, The important thing is that I'm going to bed now. She turned over to face the wall and pointed the back of her head at Xiaomai. Xiaomai could not get an answer from her and could only give up. He Yan could not sleep. He kept thinking about what happened on the horse path during the day. No matter what, it was too strange for three instructors to suddenly challenge her to a riding and archery competition. The three of them teamed up to fight her. If she was a normal recruit, she would not be able to handle it. But they did not seem to consider whether she could withstand this kind of competition. It was not like a challenge, but more like a test or to prove something. In the end, she subdued Ma Damiai's horse. She used a horse taming technique that she learned from a barbarian captive when she was in the army. That captive was a horse trainer. His horse taming technique was superb and made them suffer a lot. After Hien captured him, the captive was afraid of death. He wrote down his tribe's precious horse taming technique and gave it to Hien. But that horse taming technique was too complicated. Hien only learned a little. Even so, it was enough to stop a normal horse. If she did not do that today, she would not have won against Ma Damiai. But if it was really a test, the only person who could command the Liang Province Guards Institute's instructor was either the head instructor or Xiao Ju. If it was Xiao Ju, what was his purpose? Could it be that he wanted to pick someone to go to the 9 Flags Battalion, so he hurriedly ordered the instructor to test her qualifications and skills? Was that so? Hien faintly felt that she might have thought wrongly, but she could not find any other way to think about it. After thinking for a while, she decided not to think about it anymore. Since she was already here, she might as well take things as they came. After all, she did not lose this round. Chapter 66. Hien originally thought that if it was Xiao Ju who asked Ma Damiai and the others to compete in equestrian archery with him, then after the competition, they would be able to see that his skills were out of the ordinary and would do something about it. But after more than 10 days had passed, the days were still as usual. Other than the occasional recruits who came to compete with her, nothing else happened. She didn't even get an extra cup of military rations. Maybe it was just a coincidence? Hien thought that maybe the instructors were bored in the Liang Province Guard and wanted to test their skills. She put this matter to the back of her mind for the time being. After a few rains, the summer heat seemed to have lessened a bit. Occasionally, when she woke up in the morning for a jog, there was no sun and a cool breeze. Before long, the summer of the Liang Province Guard would be over. It was also because the weather was gradually cooling that the recruits were allowed to enter the mountain a few days ago. Mount Baiwei was extremely large. It would take at least a day and a night to climb the mountain. Because of this, the recruits were strictly forbidden from climbing the mountain. At most, they could only go to the top. Every day, 5 people would go up the mountain to patrol. Hong Shan didn't understand. What are 5 people patrolling for? If there really is any danger, will 5 people be enough? Hien thought, of course it won't be enough. You weren't supposed to be patrolling in the first place. The new recruits of the Liangzhou Guard had been training here for an entire summer. Before long, it would be time for the battle for the flag. The flag battle was to plant more than 10 flags at the top of the mountain. The recruits with better aptitudes and outstanding results would be divided into teams, and they would go up the mountain to compete. There would be fights between the teams competing. When they finally went down the mountain, the team with the most flags would be the winner. The final winner would become the most promising recruit and would most likely enter the Vanguard Battalion. Hien's goal was no longer the Vanguard Battalion, but 9 Flags Battalion. Now, he had the recruits walk around the mountain every day to familiarize them with the terrain of Mount Baiwei. He wanted them to remember the location so that they wouldn't be unfamiliar with the way during the flag battle. However, the recruits didn't know. As someone who had been in the military, Hien knew. The last time she fought for the flag in Mo County was connected to the desert. When the wind blew in the desert, the landmarks disappeared and the sand dunes changed. When they were fighting for the flag, the situation was very dangerous. If it wasn't for a big brother in the team who found a small river, perhaps no one would have been able to walk out of the desert. Battle for the flag not only tested a recruit's individual skills, but also the team's teamwork. It wasn't enough to just focus on one aspect. The test for everyone was very high. Although the so-called battle for the flag was in the future, from a certain perspective, the competition had already begun. Smart people would be able to remember the way while patrolling, but those new recruits who did not have any awareness would just take it as a random walk and would not take it to heart. It would not be of any help in the future battle for the flag. Who cares? Ahigo, today it's your turn to go up the mountain. Can you take a bow and arrow and hunt a few rabbits? We'll come back secretly and roast them. I haven't tasted meat for half a month. Xiao Mai licked her lips. I won't take a crossbow. Hien smiled. A crossbow is too heavy. I'll take a knife. Most importantly, a crossbow was not suitable for close combat. If there was a problem, it wouldn't be very useful. Moreover, in a team, there would always be someone who carried a crossbow. When the time came, they could just borrow it. Seeing Xiao Mai's regretful expression, she comforted him. It's okay. In a few days, we can go up the mountain together. At that time, we can hunt as many rabbits as we want. Xiao Mai was skeptical. Hien couldn't tell him that during the flag battle, everyone would be on the mountain. The instructor wouldn't be there either. They might even have to spend the night on the mountain. Naturally, he could eat whatever he wanted. She tied the belt on her clothes tightly. Then, she heard Hong Shan say, then go down the mountain early. Let's celebrate the festival together tonight. What festival? Hien was confused. Xiao Mai said, Qixi Festival. Hien. He almost forgot that today was the 7th day of the 7th month, Daughter's Day. However, why would a group of men celebrate Qixi Festival? Hien found it funny. Shouldn't we celebrate it with the girls we like? Do you guys like any girls? Hong Shan immediately said, don't look down on others. There are many girls who like your brother Shan. If brother Shan wants to celebrate Qixi Festival, the girls will definitely be happy. I don't. Xiao Mai quickly said, but my brother does. My brother likes Sister Xiaolan, who works at Uncle Sun's noodle shop in the east of the city. Shirtu. Hien looked at Shirtu. Shirtu's ears were red. Xiao Mai asked again, Higa, do you have any girls you like? What kind of girls do you like? Hien casually made up a story. Good-looking, smart, good fighting skills, and rich. Oh, right. Gentle, considerate, lively, and interesting. It's best if she has some skills in music, chess, calligraphy, and painting. It'd be best if she knows how to cook. After Hien left, Xiao Mai was still thinking about Hien's words. She muttered, He's requirements for his sweetheart are really high, don't listen to his nonsense. Hong Shan nodded. He wants to marry a princess. Xiao Mai, don't learn from him. Xiao Mai nodded seriously. Hien went to the weapon rack in the martial arts arena and took a Mandarin duck sword. Ever since she defeated Huang Xiong's golden broadsword with the Mandarin duck sword, there were people practicing with the Mandarin duck sword every day. However, they were not as agile as Hien when it came to practicing the Mandarin duck sword. After practicing a few times, they felt that it was not suitable for them and gave up. In the end, Hien was the only one who used the Mandarin duck sword in the martial arts arena. Today, when she went up the mountain, the Mandarin duck sword was light and easy to use. If she wanted to start a fire and roast 2 fish, the Mandarin duck sword would be easy to kill. She took the Mandarin duck sword and walked to the end of the horse path. The other 4 people were already ready. Hien did not know these 4 people. They were not Liang Jiaodo's subordinates. When they saw Hien, one of them smiled and pointed to Hien. Go and pick a horse. We're leaving now. Hien nodded. She went to the stable and picked a horse. The 5 of them went up Mount Baiyue. The mountain was covered with dense forests. It was much cooler and more comfortable to walk than at the foot of the mountain. From time to time, there were wild rabbits jumping by. Someone asked, why don't we hunt a few rabbits? Okay. The recruit who greeted Hien immediately agreed. Who brought a crossbow? Everyone looked at each other. Probably because the crossbow was too heavy and they had to stay on the mountain for more than half a day. No one wanted to bring it. So no one brought it. Well, no one brought it. A recruit with slanted eyes shrugged. His tone was not very good, but his eyes were looking at Hien. Then we can only watch. Everyone knew that Hien's archery skills were outstanding. They probably thought that Hien would bring it. Hien looked back indifferently, with a calm expression. You asked General Fei Hong to hunt rabbits for you. Did you bring your brain? You're really shameless, she thought. Chapter 67. Rabbits were not to be hunted. Foxes were also not to be hunted, and birds were still not to be hunted. Since they could not hunt anything, they could only obediently patrol the mountain. The mountain paths of Mount Baiwe were rugged, but the scenery was excellent. White mist rose from the mountain stream, and as far as the eye could see, it was surrounded by an emerald color. Spring light and clouds curled around the robes, and the peaks rose up majestically. It was like a fairyland. Slanted Eyes was very smart. He carried a few pieces of yellow paper with him, and when he reached a place, he used charcoal to draw a few steps on the yellow paper. He was memorizing the path. Every once in a while, everyone would make a mark on the tree to prevent them from getting lost and not knowing how to get back down the mountain. Because no one brought a bow, the journey was very quiet. They set off early in the morning and finally climbed to the top by noon. Everyone tied their horses to the trees and rested for a while beside a small stream. After eating their dry rations and recovering their strength, they could go down the mountain and return to the garrison before sunset. The recruit who greeted Hien was not very physically strong. When he reached the top, he was so tired that he collapsed on the ground. He impatiently took out some dry rations to fill his stomach and muttered, "We've finally reached the top. I can't walk anymore." Hien washed his hands by the stream and sat down under the shertu beside him. He also took out some dry rations. The dry rations were the dry biscuits given out in the morning. They were dry and hard. The recruit came over and took out a small handful of pine nuts from his pocket. He handed it to Hien and said, "Here." Hien was surprised. "Where did you get these?" "My mother packed them for me before we came to the Liangzhou garrison. She couldn't bear to eat them all in one go, so she saved them." He was reluctant to part with them, but still pretended to be generous. "Try it." Hien picked up one from his palm, peeled it, and threw it into his mouth. "It's very fragrant. Right? The child was somewhat happy. "My name is Shun Hong. I know you. Hien, you were very powerful at the training field. No one could beat you. I was just lucky." Hien smiled. Shun Hong looked into the distance and said regretfully, "It's a pity that I didn't bring my crossbow. I didn't know that you were going with us. If I had known, I would have definitely brought one. Your archery skills are so good, just use the crossbow to shoot a few rabbits and we can eat roasted rabbits." Could it be that he and my Mai were biological brothers from different mothers? Hien thought about it and asked casually, "What weapon did you bring?" Shun Hong scratched the back of her head in embarrassment.
Me?
"I'm not good at archery, so it's useless to bring a crossbow. My swordsmanship is average and my spear skills are also. I reckon that I won't be of much use, so He took out a long staff from behind his back. "And this."
Hien was speechless.
He actually brought a staff, and it was not an iron staff, but a long staff made from bamboo. Was there such a weapon on the weapon rack in the martial arts practice field? He undoubted that Shun Hong's staff was indeed useless. Oh, unless there was a jujube tree here, he could use this long staff to hit the jujubes. As if seeing Hien's speechlessness, Shun Hong quickly tried to remedy the situation. "Anyway, we won't fight." Hien nodded. "You're right." She and Shun Hong sat on one side, while Slanted Eye and the other two sat on the other side a little further away from them. After eating, Hien leaned against a tree and rested for a while. Shun Hong carefully asked him, "That, Hien, can I borrow your knife?" "What's wrong? Do you see that?" Shun Hong pointed to a green patch by the stream. The leaves were long and thin, and it was impossible to tell what kind of grass it was. He said, "My family runs a pharmacy. This is called bookbelt grass. It's shaped like rhombus, but it's not rhombus. It can be eye-catching and soothe the nerves. I want to pick some back. We've been here all day, so it might be useful. But the bookbelt grass is very tough, so it's not easy to pick. The weapons they're carrying are either long knives or spears. They're not as good as your small knife." She was using her knife as a sickle. Hien.
"Okay."
She took out the mandarin duck knife from her waist and handed it to Shun Hong. "Be careful." Shun Hong put down the staff in her hand and happily took the knife. She said to Hien, "Thank you. I'll cut some more. When I'm done, I'll give you another one." Yan wanted to say that there was no need, but then he thought that perhaps Hongshan could use it. Hongshan said that he had been too hot recently and couldn't sleep well. Moreover, it was Shun Hong's kind intention, so he swallowed the words back into his stomach. She leaned against the tree and watched Shun Hong busying herself. As she watched, she suddenly heard movement behind her. She looked again and saw Slanted Eye and the other two people untying the horse ropes on the tree. Yan was stunned and asked, "Are we leaving already? Aren't you going to rest for a while?" In total, they had been here for less than an hour. It was still early, so there was more than enough time to go down the mountain. Slanted Eye didn't seem to like Yan and was impatient when talking to her. "We're not going down the mountain. Let's go to the front first." Yan looked ahead. They were already at the top of the mountain. If they wanted to go to the front, they would have to climb over the mountain. She frowned. "The instructor said that we can't climb over the mountain. It's just 2 more steps." "We won't climb over," Slanted Eye said. "We didn't ask you to come with us. You just wait here. We'll be back soon." "I think," Yan stood up. "It's better to listen to the instructor. There might be some danger." "Zhengxian, are you going or not?" The other person had already untied the horse rope and got on the horse. Slanted Eye, Zhengxian, looked at Yan and said, "If you're afraid of danger, then don't go. Besides, only you and I know. As long as you don't say anything, who will know? Don't worry for nothing. Go play with that fool cutting grass. We'll go first." After saying that, he didn't care about Yan and got on the horse himself. Together with the other 2 people, they went into the depths of the forest. Yan wanted to chase after them, but he couldn't leave Shun Hong alone. While he was thinking, the 3 people had already gone far away. She sighed and sat down under the tree again. Forget it. They didn't find anything wrong on the way up the mountain. There weren't many people in the mountain, and there weren't any big beasts. At most, there were a few badgers and wild cats. When they saw people, they would run away. After a while, Shun Hong came back from the stream. He was carrying a bundle of grass in each hand. The grass was really shaped like a book belt. It was long and soft. When he smelled it, he could smell its fragrance. Shun Hong found the longest straw and tied the 2 big bundles of book belt. He handed one bundle to Yan. "This is it. Go back and dry it in the sun. Find a cloth bag and put it under your pillow. I guarantee you'll have a good sleep." Yan said, "Thank you." "No problem." Shun Hong waved her hand. Only then did he realize that the other people had disappeared. He asked curiously, "Where are they?" "They went for a walk." Yan shrugged. "Let's wait here for them to come back." Shun Hong didn't understand. Just as she was about to ask, she suddenly heard a scream from the depths of the forest. It was one of the new recruits who was with them. Yan was startled. He frowned. In the next moment, he untied the reins and got on the horse. He went straight to the source of the sound. Chapter 68. The source of the sound was not far away. Yan galloped on his horse, and Shun Hong followed behind him. She shouted as she ran, "Hey, wait for me!" As they went further up the mountain, the forest became denser and more moist due to the shade. Almost no sunlight could pass through. In front of people, it felt like the night, gloomy and cold. Yan stopped in front of a bush. Zhengxian and the other 2 were right in front of him. Their horses were anxiously galloping in place, not daring to take a step forward. Zhengxian's face was pale, and the other 2 were on the verge of tears. Around the 3 of them, 4 wolves were crouching and growling at them. Yan and Shun Hong happened to come over, and the wolves looked at Yan with murderous gazes. How could there be wolves at this time of the year? Yan felt a little strange. He looked at Zhengxian and the others. They were all in a sorry state. Yan also noticed that the saber at Zhengxian's waist was missing. A pack of wolves would attack a person who was alone, but they would not attack the 3 of them for no reason. Yan asked, "What did you do?" Zhengxian's face was pale, and he did not speak. The recruit behind him said with a sobbing tone, We walked to the front and saw a cave. There were howls coming from inside, so we went in to take a look. There was a litter of wolf pups inside. Did you touch the wolf pups? Hien asked sternly. Her harsh words scared the recruit. He quickly replied, No, no, we just wanted to take them back and raise them. Not long after we left, we saw these wolves. Hien simply wanted to pry open these people's brains and see what exactly was inside. Seeing a wolf's den meant that a female wolf was nearby. Not only did they not leave quickly, they even took the wolf pups. Did they really think that the adult wolves would not follow the scent? Where are the wolf pups?
Hien asked.
We were scared and quickly threw the wolf pups back to them. But what? Hien's heart suddenly had a bad premonition. But one of them fell on a rock and seemed to be dead, the person said. You. Hien was furious. This pack of wolves would not leave. What are you yelling for? Zheng Xian was angry. Isn't it just a few wolves? Just kill him. How could a person be forced to death by a few beasts? Hien sneered. Is that so? What about your saber? Zheng Xian's expression turned even uglier. After he killed the wolf pup, he had drawn his saber to confront the pack of wolves. However, the pack of wolves was cunning. His saber skills were not bad, but in his nervousness, the wolves took advantage of him and nearly injured him. In a moment of desperation, he even dropped his saber. If it wasn't for that, they wouldn't be facing such a desperate situation now. Cut the crap. Now we can either die together or think of a way. He forced the words out from between his teeth. Just as they were talking, Shen Hong also rushed over on his horse. When he saw this scene, he jumped in fright, and his voice immediately trembled. So many wolves. Why are there so many wolves? The wolves lowered their bodies and bared their fangs. This was a sign that they were about to attack. If they had a match, it would be fine. Wolves were afraid of fire. However, they had come out in broad daylight and had not brought any with them. Just as he thought of this, the 4 wolves pounced on the 3 people surrounding them. The 3 people screamed in panic. One of their horse legs was bitten and almost fell off. Shen Hong was about to cry. Help! What was the use of calling for help now? There was no one else here. Hien steeled his heart and rushed in on his horse. With her charge, she had broken the encirclement of the wolves. When the wolves saw her, they rushed towards her. Hien urged, Where are your spears? Take them out and use them.
Oh.
The 2 recruits seemed to have woken up from a dream. Only then did they remember their spears. They took them out and waved them around a few times, but they couldn't hold them steady. Hien's heart suddenly turned cold.
It was impossible to count on these people.
Hien wanted to reach for his saber. Only then did he remember that his saber had been borrowed by Shen Hong. He only had a long stick made of bamboo on him. He shouted, Shen Hong, throw my saber over. Shen Hong responded. She trembled as she pulled out her saber and threw it over. However, Hien was probably too nervous. He didn't even have time to prepare a saber. The long saber fell from the air, leaving only a short saber in its scabbard. It was thrown in the air, and Hien put it away. The wolves surrounded them again, waiting for an opportunity to attack. Hien said, When I tell you to run later, just turn around and run. Don't care about anything else. Run down the mountain until you reach the camp. Let the instructors come up, understand? Shen Hong asked, What about you? I have a way to shake them off. Hien, how can we run? The recruit beside Zheng Xian sobbed. We are surrounded. They will bite the horse legs. If they bite off the horse legs, we won't be able to escape. It's not like there's no way. After Hien said this, the short saber in his hand suddenly flew out. The yang saber was originally small. His movement was fast. In the blink of an eye, everyone only saw a flash of silver light. Suddenly, there was a miserable howl. The smell of blood immediately flowed out. The largest wolf fell to the ground. Blood kept bubbling out of its throat. The saber had completely sunk into its throat. Only the handle of the saber was left outside. The wolf struggled a few times and stopped breathing. Run! Hien shouted. Zheng Xian and the others didn't dare to breathe loudly. They immediately shouted, Jia, and used all their strength to rush out of the forest. They thought that the remaining wolves would chase after them. They didn't dare to look back. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared. The remaining wolves didn't chase after them. They panicked for a moment. When they looked at Hien again, their gazes were extremely fierce. Hien killed the leader of the wolves. Wolves were pack animals. Among these wolves, the largest one was their leader. They listened to the leader's command. Hien killed them. They were a group of dragons without a leader. They were not as smart as before. But at the same time, as the price of killing the leader, she would face the revenge of these wolves. A wolf bared its white teeth and pounced at her. Its sharp claws and teeth could tear a person's head apart. Hien swept his staff horizontally in front of him, causing the wolf to roll forward, pouncing on empty air. It was a very soft sound. Hien's ears were amazing. Once she heard it, her heart sank. The bamboo stick had cracks. It might not be able to withstand a few blows before it broke. How unlucky. She cursed in a low voice. It was just 3 wolves. She could deal with them alone. But now, she had no other weapons on her except for the stick that was about to break. This was really a case of a hero stumped by a penny. No, it was a case of blessings don't come in pairs and misfortunes don't come singly. A person couldn't be forced to death by animals. She thought of Zheng Xian's words and laughed softly. On the battlefield, other than taking the initiative to attack, she was also good at running away. Run. The girl's voice resounded through the forest, startling countless birds. The long stick seemed to have infinite strength. It directly struck forward, forcibly opening a path. She rode the horse with the long stick in her hand. It seemed that she was going to disappear into the vast forest. Behind her, the pack of wolves chased after her. It was a close call. Chapter 69. The wind blew past their ears. After running for a long time, the horse stopped. Shen Hong hugged the horse's stomach. They ran as fast as they could. The mountain road was bumpy, so they didn't dare to stop. Only now did they feel nauseous. They were already halfway up the mountain. When they looked back, they didn't see any wolves chasing after them. A recruit said, "We're saved." Shen Hong looked at his waist in a daze. When he came, he grabbed a bamboo stick. Now that the bamboo stick was given to Hien, he thought of Hien. His face turned pale, and he asked in a trembling voice, "Where is Hien?"
There was only one bamboo stick.
Shen Hong had lost one of his mandarin duck knives. The other one was stuck in the wolf's throat. Hien didn't have any weapons. The 3 wolves were charging at him menacingly. How could he escape alone? Should we go back and take a look? He gathered his courage and asked, "What nonsense are you talking about?" Zheng Xian looked at him coldly. "Those wolves are still there. It wasn't easy for us to escape. Are we going back to die?" "But Hien is behind us. He can't do it alone." Shen Hong thought of Hien, and his eyes turned red. He felt that Hien was a good person. They were just eating pine nuts together. "Didn't he ask us to go down the mountain to find the instructor?" The recruit beside Zheng Xian said, "Let's go down the mountain and tell the instructor to save him."
No.
Shen Hong looked at Zheng Xian in disbelief. Zheng Xian's expression didn't change. "If we tell the instructor, he will know that we went over the mountain. He just saved us. If it wasn't for Hien, we would be dead." Shen Hong said loudly, "You know that the 3 of us almost died. If he went against the wolves alone, he would definitely die." Zheng Xian's voice was louder than Shen Hong's. "Going over the mountain is a violation of military orders. If it's light, you will be punished with a cane. If it's heavy, you will be beheaded. Do you want others to die for Hien who is already dead? Shen Hong, do you want to do this?" Shen Hong was stunned by the roar. He was naturally timid and afraid of trouble. If it weren't for his family's misfortune, he would have been the young master of a medicine shop for the rest of his life. He would have lived a normal life, without illness or disaster. Now that something had happened, he was already flustered. As soon as he heard that Su Hui's head had fallen to the ground, he shuddered in fear. He still had a mother to take care of at home. If he died, There would be no male in the family. How would the old and young live?
I.
Shun Hong stammered, unable to speak. After we go down the mountain, pretend that nothing happened. When the sun sets, tell the instructor that Hien didn't listen to anyone's advice. He climbed the mountain and couldn't find him, Zheng Xian said emotionlessly. This was not only to block Hien's last way out, but also to frame Hien with the crime of violating military orders. Shun Hong shook her head, but the other two were already worried that they would be punished, so they agreed. Zheng Xian stared at Shun Hong and said, "If you want to complain, go ahead. Let's see if the instructor believes you, or us." After saying that, he no longer cared about Shun Hong's expression and urged his horse to gallop forward. Shun Hong had no other choice. The mountain was getting dark, so she could only follow. The sky was getting dark, and there was almost no light in the forest. The horse lost its way on Mount Baiyue. Hien held the bamboo stick and looked back. He breathed a sigh of relief. He had finally shaken off the wolves. This was the first time he had seen wolves so relentlessly chasing after him. Hien curled his lips and thought of the wolves he had encountered in Mo County. At that time, there was a famine in Mo County. All the wolves within 100 miles were caught and eaten. They were not as arrogant as the ones on Mount Baiyue. Thinking of this, he felt that Zheng Xuanda was really brainless. Why would he think of catching wolves to raise? Wolves were animals that could not be domesticated. Those that could be domesticated were domestic dogs that would wag their tails at people, while wolves only knew how to bite people's throats. The horse turned in a circle and did not go any further. There were trees everywhere, and they looked exactly the same. She had not been able to make a mark on the trees to avoid the wolves. She was afraid that they had already climbed over the mountain and did not know where she was. If Shun Hong and the others did not inform Liang Ping in time, they would not be able to leave the forest when it was dark. Without a fire starter, they were afraid of encountering wild animals. They could only spend the night on the mountain. Thinking of this, she sighed and got off the horse. She planned to find a cave to shelter from the wind. Just as she got off the horse and stood up, she suddenly felt that something was wrong. She did not know why, but if she had to, it was probably because of her intuition of danger from years of fighting on the battlefield. She subconsciously tilted her head and felt a black shadow pass over her head. Something scratched her neck and brought out a trace of blood. The horse was startled and raised its front hooves. Hien did not hold the reins tightly, and the horse rushed forward without looking back. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared into the depths of the forest. She turned her head and saw the black shadow that had just pounced on her. It was crouching in the grass, revealing 2 green eyes. It was the wolf just now. Hien looked at the wolf and then looked in the direction it came from. She suddenly realized. Among the few wolves just now, there was actually a smart one. It knew that it could not catch up with Hien, who was riding a horse, so it took a shortcut. Baiyue Mountain was not Hien's territory, but it was the territory of the mountain beasts. It must have been lurking for a long time, waiting for Hien to let down her guard and then pounce on her and bite her throat. In fact, the wolf had almost succeeded. Hien touched her neck and felt a burning sensation. Her hand was stained with blood. Seeing that its attack had failed, the wolf bared its fangs and pounced on Hien from behind. Hien rolled on the ground to avoid its claws. She was a little anxious. Now that the horse was gone, she could only fight with the wolf. But she only had the stick. When Shun Hong went up the mountain, even if she only had a string of darts, she thought in her heart. She held the stick horizontally and pounced on the wolf's head. The bamboo stick hit the wolf's head. With a bang, it broke from the middle. The wolf's head was hit to the side, but it only bled a little. It looked at Hien and howled furiously twice before pouncing on her again. What kind of broken stick is this? Hien cursed and dodged. The wolf was very cunning. It did not attack from the front. Instead, it pounced on her from behind, intending to bite her neck. Hien dodged a few times, but she did not manage to dodge and was bitten by it. She bent her elbow and stabbed the wolf's stomach. The wolf was hit, and cried out in pain, desperately pouncing on her. One person and one wolf wrestled together. The leaves in the forest rustled. Hien forcefully pulled the wolf's head to prevent its mouth from biting her. She thought in her heart, "Do I have to bite this wolf with my mouth?" Just as she thought of this, she suddenly felt that there was nothing under her feet. Before she had time to react, she felt her body fall. She heard a bang sound. The next moment, she and the wolf fell to the ground together. The sky became round, and the tree branches seemed to be higher. Below her feet was bumpy soil, and there was a wolf that had just stood up. She and the wolf fell into the trap together. Chapter 70. The arena became even smaller. It was like an even smaller martial arts stage. The only difference was that her opponent had become a bloodthirsty wild beast. At this moment, Hien didn't have any weapons in his hands. Even the bamboo stick that had been broken into two was gone. The wolf's eyes burst with excitement. It was a smart and cruel animal. In this case, the human would definitely die. Hien's lips curled into a bitter smile. God was so kind to her. Why did he arrange such a difficult situation for her? She was not a miraculous strong man. How could she turn danger into safety every time? This was probably a trap set up by hunters to catch rabbits or foxes. Perhaps it had been too long since the trap was set up, but it was completely covered by dead branches and leaves. Who knew that she would fall into the trap while fighting with the wolf? Now, there was no way out. The wolf slowly stood up. Hien also wanted to stand up. She knew it was not good when she moved. When she fell, she hurt her left leg. Now when she moved her left leg, it was painful. She had to stand up with the help of the stone wall. The wolf lowered its body and made a low growl. Hien looked down at it. Her back was against the stone wall. She did not move. It took a few steps and suddenly rushed towards Hien. With its bloody mouth open in front of his eyes, Hien could almost smell the disgusting stench of blood. In front of his eyes, Hien recalled the bones he saw on the roadside that were eaten by wolves. Their bodies were mutilated, their faces unrecognizable, and only a pile of rotten meat was left. In the nick of time, she suddenly stretched out her left arm. The wolf rushed towards her neck, but she slapped it away. She used some strength in this slap, but it was no match for a wild beast. She only protected her neck, but in the next moment, her arm was bitten by the wolf. She did not need to look to know that the bite was not light. She did not care at all. Instead, she moved forward, as if she wanted to put her arm deeper into the wolf's mouth. Before the wolf opened its mouth, Hien's right hand suddenly chopped forward. A blood-curdling scream erupted from the wolf's mouth. The cunning and persistent wolf struggled desperately in the pit. Its eyes were scratched by the sharp stones, and blood splattered everywhere. Hien let go of her hand. In her palm, there was a small piece of shirtu. The sharp end of the shirtu was still stained with blood. She stabbed the wolf's eyes. From the moment she fell into the trap, she looked around for something that could be used to defend herself. Unfortunately, there were only scattered stones in the pit. She simply found the one that could be used. The wolf lost a pair of eyes. It could not see anything. Because of the pain, it could not care about anything else. It could only struggle in the pit. Hien gritted her teeth. Hien leaned against the stone wall. She used all her strength to press the wolf's head. Blood slowly oozed out. At first it was warm, but gradually it became cold, and she slowly. His left arm had been bitten by a wolf, and the blood had stuck to his sleeve. He could not lift his left leg, and his neck had been scraped. Needless to say, she was also in a sorry state. But when she looked at the dead wolf, a wave of sadness surged in her heart. She was very similar to the wolf. After losing a pair of eyes, she could only be manipulated by others. Now that she saw the wolf die so miserably, although it was her doing, she thought of all the things that had happened. She felt exhausted. She did not have the strength to do anything else. The sun set. The last of the sunlight disappeared. The forest became dark. She sat quietly with her head lowered. In an instant, it was as if she had stopped breathing. She died quietly. No one in the Liang Province City Guard office knew of the shocking scene on the mountain. When Zheng Xian arrived at the City Guard office, he went with the other two to find the instructor. They purposely stayed at the foot of the mountain for a while before returning. The sun had already set. Only a remnant of the blood-red evening glow was left on the horizon. It spread out brilliantly by the water. Shenhong did not go with them. She returned to her room. When she returned, the others had already finished eating dinner. Seeing Shenhong sitting on the side in a daze, someone asked with a smile, "Hey, how did it feel to go up the mountain today? Why does she look so dazed? She can't be so tired that she's stupid, right? That's possible."
Ha ha ha. She can't even do that.
"She's too weak." Everyone teased her. Thinking that Shenhong was tired, they did not take it to heart and went to do their own things. After a while, Wang Ba walked in. He was in the same room as Shenhong. When Wang Ba came in, the recruits in the room all greeted him. Although Wang Ba lost to He Yan in the crossbow competition, everyone still respected him here. Wang Ba also saw Shenhong sitting on the bed in a daze. He asked casually, "What's wrong with her?" "I don't know. It's her turn to go up the mountain today. When she came back, she was like this," someone replied. Wang Ba glanced at Shenhong. He felt that she was a bit strange. Although he often bullied this honest person, no matter how much he bullied her, he had never seen Shenhong in such a daze. He walked in front of Shenhong and gave her a shove. "What's wrong? Did you encounter a wild beast on the mountain and get scared out of your wits?" It would have been better if he did not say it. Once he said the word wild beast, Shenhong's body trembled even more violently. His mouth opened and closed, but no one knew what he was saying. Wang Ba leaned closer to listen. He only heard her say, "I'm sorry." "Sorry?
Who are you sorry to?"
Wang Ba frowned and asked. Shenhong was still talking to himself. Wang Ba was impatient. He lifted him up like a chicken and asked, "Brat, tell me everything you encountered on the mountain today. If you don't," he shook his fist threateningly, "I'll teach you a lesson." Shenhong seemed to wake up from his thoughts when he was reminded. Wang Ba looked at him fiercely. He was already feeling guilty. With this provocation, he immediately blurted out, "He Yan. He Yan is still on the mountain." "He Yan?" Wang Ba's heart skipped a beat when he heard He Yan. This person really had a grudge against him. However, he still asked curiously, "What mountain? You guys went up the mountain together today? Why is he still on the mountain after you came down? What do you mean?" "There were wolves, so many wolves. He Yan led the wolves away to save us." Shenhong cried out loud and said everything in one breath. "Zheng Xian didn't let us tell the instructor. He even said that He Yan climbed the mountain and went far away." No, they were the ones who climbed the mountain. He Yan saved them, but they wanted him to die and slandered He Yan. He Yan was alone on the mountain without a weapon.
"He will die."
"It's all our fault." He spoke incoherently and incoherently. However, Wang Ba understood the meaning of Shenhong's words in the blink of an eye. He was stunned for a moment. Suddenly, he became angry and slammed his fist on the table, scaring Shenhong. "He saved you, but you left him alone on the mountain?" Shenhong cried, "I didn't want to. I had no choice." Wang Ba looked at him with disdain. "Coward." He turned and left. Chapter 71. When Wang Ba found Liang Jiaodo was talking to Shenhan. Zheng Xian and a few others were standing beside them. Shenhan's expression was extremely ugly. He could only vaguely make out a few words, disobeying military orders. Climbing the mountain, Zheng Xian was still talking when someone suddenly rushed over. Before he could react, he felt a heavy punch on his face and fell to the ground. "Wang Ba, are you crazy?" Liang Ping was stunned for a moment before he came back to his senses. He shouted at Wang Ba to stop what he was about to do. "Liang Jiaodo, did this brat tell you that He Yan disobeyed military orders and climbed the mountain by himself and hasn't returned yet?" Wang Ba panted. Shen Han and Liang Ping looked at each other. Wang Ba sneered and stared at Zheng Xian, who was crawling up from the ground. This bastard is shameless. Zheng Xian, do you dare to say who saved you? You fucking climbed the mountain by yourself and got surrounded by wolves. If it wasn't for He Yan, would you have been able to escape? You not only ran away by yourself, but you also want to slander others. Are you still a man? Zheng Xian's face was pale. He was beaten until his lips were bleeding. He stood up and wiped the blood off his lips. Instructor, don't listen to his nonsense. He Yan climbed the mountain by himself. If you don't believe me, you can ask them. He pointed to the other 2 recruits who went up the mountain with him. The 2 recruits nodded hurriedly. Yes. He Yan wanted to climb the mountain by himself. We tried to persuade him, but he didn't listen. Wang Ba was furious. He rushed up and wanted to beat them again. Are you speaking human language? That Shen Hong was so timid that it was pitiful. After being scared a little, she confessed everything. How could she have the guts to lie? Moreover, He Yan, although Wang Ba didn't like him very much, he knew that He Yan wouldn't take the initiative to court death. Compared to Zheng Xian, He Yan was much more pleasing to the eye. Liang Jiao stopped Wang Ba and said angrily, "Stop it, all of you. If the commander-in-chief comes, all of you will be punished." What's going on? Speak of the devil. Xiao Ju's voice rang out from behind him as soon as he finished speaking. He walked over from the backyard of the Defense Institute and glanced at the crowd. He walked over and said to Shen Han, "Speak." Shen Han's scalp went numb. He answered honestly, "Today they went up the mountain together. He Yan hasn't come back yet." Zheng Xian said that He Yan disobeyed military orders and climbed over the mountain without permission. In the end, he couldn't find anyone and could only rush down the mountain by himself before sunset. That's not what I heard, Wang Ba sneered. These ingrates climbed over the mountain first and provoked the wolves. He Yan lured the wolves away to save them, but these people ran away on their own. They didn't care about their brothers' lives and still wanted to slander them. In our mountain bandits, this kind of person is called immoral. Commander-in-chief, don't listen to him. Zheng Xian hurriedly knelt on the ground. We all tried to persuade He Yan, but he didn't listen and insisted on leaving. At that time, the sky was getting dark, so we had to come back first to ask for help. When he spoke, he was sincere and sincere. Xiao Ju glanced at him, but couldn't tell what he was thinking. The sun had completely set, and the last trace of red was swallowed up by the mountain. The forest was silent. If this continued, He Yan's chances of survival would only become slimmer and slimmer. Wang Ba gritted his teeth. Since the instructors aren't willing to take this risk for him, then I'll go save him myself. After he finished speaking, he was about to walk out. I've been the king of this mountain for so many years. I'm not afraid of a few animals. But then again, in this day and age, humans can't compare to animals. He had only taken one step when with its bang, a sword brushed past his scalp and went straight into the wooden stake in front of him, scaring Wang Ba. He turned around and saw their right army commander-in-chief, Xiao Ju, looking unhappy. He warned Liang Jiao, "Liang Ping, take care of your soldiers." Liang Ping. He braced himself and agreed, but in his heart, he cried countless times. He thought that this time, he would be able to gain a good impression in front of military Governor Xiao, but he didn't expect to be called out and criticized. For a moment, he felt disheartened and wished that he had never been here. Shen Han hesitated for a moment, then said, "Commander-in-chief, we'll bring people into the mountain now." "No need." Xiao Ju interrupted him. Wang Ba stared at him in disbelief. Zheng Xian's eyes flashed with a hint of joy. "The terrain on the mountain is complicated. I'm afraid there's a trap." "If you can't do it, I'll go," he said. After he finished speaking, he called out, and a black horse galloped over from afar. This horse was very majestic, with 4 snow-white hooves, 2 green ears, and a unique coat of fur. It moved as if it was riding on clouds, stopping in front of Xiao Ju and intimately rubbing its head against Xiao Ju's hand. This was Xiao Ju's favorite horse, Green Ears. Xiao Ju mounted the horse. Shen Han wanted to say something, but Xiao Ju had already ridden the horse away. Liang Ping asked blankly, "Head instructor, what commander-in-chief said is a trap? Is there anyone else on the mountain?" Shen Han didn't say anything. Of course, he knew that they were suspecting Hien. This time, Hien disappeared on the mountain. Who knew if it was intentional? A trap referred to Hien, not his opponent. Hopefully, they were just overthinking. It was getting colder and colder on the mountain at night. The trap was very deep, and it was difficult for her to climb up alone. Now that she was injured, it was even more difficult for her to move. The smell of blood would attract nearby beasts. If she really walked on the ground, she would be swallowed by the beasts within a few steps. This place was also quite good. Hien looked up at the sky. The night sky was divided by the trap, and only a round one was left. Looking up from here, she could see the shining galaxy. The night was as cold as water, and countless bright stars formed the shadow of the night sky. She shifted her position, and with her head tilted up, she could see the starry sky and felt a little cold. But in this trap, other than her, there was only the corpse of the wolf. Hien thought for a moment and shrank her body into the wolf's stomach. Although it was cold, she still had a body of fur, which could protect her from the cold. Hien reached out to untie the water bottle at her waist. There was only a mouthful of water left in the bottle. She drank all the water and threw the bottle aside. Cold, hungry, and thirsty, she had not experienced this for many years. Suddenly, she remembered what Hongshan said to her before she left in the morning. "Come back early. Let's celebrate the festival together tonight." It was a clear autumn night. The moonlight was like silk, the fireflies were dancing, and the river was white. At the end of the Black Magpie Bridge, Hien looked up at the stars in the distance and murmured, "Every family is looking at the autumn moon, wearing tens of thousands of red silk." She sighed and smiled helplessly. Today is the Chinese Valentine's Day. In the silent night, the cowherd and the weaver girl were crossing the Magpie Bridge in the distance. A cool breeze blew, blowing away all the joy and hatred. Someone's voice sounded, with a mocking smile.
"What?
You still want to go to the river with your sweetheart?" Hien looked up in surprise, only to see a slender figure suddenly appear in the round sky. He stood at the edge of the trap, the moonlight swaying, flowing bright, and looking at her playfully. It was Xiao Ju. Chapter 72. In the pit, the young man was leaning against the stone wall. He reeked of blood, and half of his body was buried under the wolf's corpse. He was covered in wounds, but he was still in the mood for romance. He looked at her with a pair of bright eyes. They were full of surprise, but there was no trace of joy. Hien blurted out, "Xiao, Commander-in-Chief, why are you here?" At this time, she thought that no one would come. In fact, after thinking about it carefully, the possibility of Zheng Xian finding someone to save her was very slim. Shen Hong was so timid that she probably wouldn't dare to say anything after a little threat. Since she couldn't count on others, she could only rely on herself. Hien originally wanted to stay here until dawn and wait for the blood on her body to dry. She wanted to recover her strength and then think of a way to climb out of the pit. She didn't expect that someone would come to save her, and she didn't expect that the person would be Xiao Ju. Xiao Ju didn't answer her question. She only asked, "Can you come up by yourself?" Hien replied, "No." The pit was crudely made, but it was too deep. She had no strength in her legs and couldn't climb up. Xiao Ju looked at her, then turned and left.
Hien was confused.
What did he mean? He left just like that? After a while, he came back with a long object in his hand. Hien looked at it carefully. Wasn't this the bamboo stick that she broke? Although it was broken in two, it just happened to extend from the top. Hien could hold it. Xiao Ju half knelt beside the pit and extended the bamboo stick down.
"Hold on."
Hien was speechless for a moment. She could only accept her fate and hold on. She thought to herself, "That's right. Do you expect Xiao Ju to fly down and carry you out? She felt a chill just thinking about it. This person looked like a beautiful jade, but he was very strong. He Yan held on to the bamboo stick, and he pulled it up with one hand. When they were about to reach the exit, he extended a hand to Hien, indicating that Hien should hold on to him. That hand's joints were distinct, slender, and beautiful. Hien was about to reach out his hand, but halfway through, his hand froze in the air. Her hands were stained with blood from the fight with the wolf. She didn't know whether it was wolf blood or human blood, but her hands were sticky. This blood-stained hand, when placed next to Xiao Ju's jade-white hand, was really unsightly. Xiao Ju loved cleanliness the most. Hien was a little hesitant. However, the man seemed to be impatient. Without waiting for her to figure out what to do, he reached forward, grabbed her wrist, and pulled her up. There was no longer the suffocating smell of blood from the pit outside, and the sky suddenly became much larger. Stars filled the sky, as if they were about to fall from the sky. Countless bright stars gathered together, as if they were about to illuminate the entire world. She turned to look at Xiao Ju. The young man stood up, threw away the bamboo stick, and stared at her. After a while, he said, "You killed a wolf." Hien didn't understand what kind of question was this. She smiled. "Yes, I almost died. I didn't bring any weapons, so I was smashed to death with sure too. I was even bitten twice." Blood seeped out from the young man's sleeves and dyed his originally red robe a dark color. However, her expression was normal, and she asked indifferently, "Why did the commander-in-chief come here personally? Where are the others?" "It's too late. I came up alone." He tapped his fingers. Hien saw that there was a horse not far away. The horse was not tied up, and when it saw Xiao Ju's actions, it immediately ran to Xiao Ju's side. Hien saw its green ears under the moonlight. His heart skipped a beat. Everyone knew that General Fengyan loved to ride a horse. It traveled thousands of miles in a day and chased after the wind and lightning. Its name was Green Ears. He didn't expect to see it here today. "Then, are we going back now?" Hien asked hesitantly. Xiao Ju looked at her incredulously. "You want to spend the night here?" "No, not at all," Hien explained. "I mean, there's no one else here. There's only one horse. Could it be that Xiao Ju wanted her to follow him all the way? Wasn't that too tragic?" "Tragic beyond compare." He patted Green Ear's head, and the horse obediently lowered its head. Xiao Ju looked at her. "Get on."
Huh? Me?
Hien was shocked. Xiao Ju was willing to let her ride this peerless horse? Did she hear wrongly? Xiao Ju's mouth twitched. "If you want to walk back, it's not impossible." No, I can," Hien replied. "I'm just too happy." What kind of day was it today? She actually got to ride the legendary Green Ears. Hien just wanted to laugh out loud. She limped over to Green Ear's side. This horse was extremely tall and mighty. Originally, the act of flipping onto the horse should have been very dashing. Unfortunately, her entire body was covered in injuries. Even if she wanted to be dashing, she couldn't. She could only grab the saddle with one hand and try to climb up. Hien's leg was injured. Her arm was bitten by a wolf. When she exerted force, the blood that had just dried up immediately seeped out. In the blink of an eye, half of her sleeve was wet. Her face was as usual. Her face was already pale, but she still had a smile on her face. Big drops of sweat rolled down her forehead, and her hair was wet. This person didn't know how embarrassing she was. Xiao Ju raised her eyebrows slightly. Hien was still climbing up with her hands and feet. Suddenly, someone's voice came from above. He said, "Don't you feel pains?" Hien was stunned. In the next moment, someone grabbed her waist and pulled her up. Before she could cry out in surprise, she was already sitting on the back of the horse. There was another person behind her, and the faint scent of moon chilin drifted over, disturbing her thoughts. "Sit tight," Xiao Ju said. Hien couldn't describe her feelings at this moment. She really didn't expect Xiao Ju to carry her onto the horse's back, It should be a hug, right? She didn't feel it clearly. It was too fast. But now he was sitting behind her. Hien was petite, and her head was leaning against his chest. It was like she was in his arms. She was frightened by her own thoughts. Subconsciously, she didn't feel shy but scared. Xiao Ju wasn't a romantic person. Moreover, she was a man now. Was everything that happened today just a dream? Xiao Ju urged the horse to leave. Hien said, Wait. He asked, What's wrong now? Look at that wolf. Hien pointed at the wolf's corpse in the pit. It wasn't easy for me to kill it. It's a pity to just leave it here. The man replied coldly, What do you want? Take it with us? Hien asked tentatively. After a while, the young man sneered. Yes. Really? Hien turned around in surprise. Commander-in-Chief, you're such a good person. She didn't expect much. He curved his lips and looked indifferent. Let it come up. You get off. Hien was speechless. She said, Pretend I didn't say anything. The horse took 2 steps and she turned around again. She almost bumped into Xiao Ju. Why don't I go down and skin the wolf before leaving? It's going to be autumn soon. The weather is cold. Wouldn't it be better to make a pair of wolfskin boots? She was answered with 2 heartless words. Shut up. Chapter 73. The horse trotted in the deep mountains. It didn't run very fast. Because it was night, she couldn't see clearly. Hien felt that it was a pity. It wasn't easy for her to ride Green Ear, but she didn't experience the legendary crossing mountains and treading water as if it were flat ground. It was really a loss. Starlight and moonlight seeped through the branches and leaves of the forest. Hien rode on the horse and finally had the mood to look at the surrounding scenery. Looking around, she saw a wolf lying on the ground not far away. It must be dead. She was surprised for a moment. She took a few more steps forward and saw another wolf corpse. After seeing about 3 such wolf corpses, Hien sensed that this was not a coincidence. She swallowed her saliva and asked carefully, Xiao, Commander-in-Chief, did you do all these? Since I met them on the road, I killed them. Otherwise, it would be troublesome to follow them all the way. He replied. Hien sighed in his heart. Look, as expected of a young killer. Just a word of disagreement, and he started a massacre. No wonder they didn't encounter any wild wolves along the way. It turned out that the more courageous ones were all killed by Xiao Ju. She looked at the wolf corpses again. They were all killed with a sword. The wounds were very small and very precise. Her gaze moved down slightly and landed on the sword on Xiao Ju's waist. Everyone knew that General Feng Yun had a famous horse and a treasured sword. The horse was called Green Ear, and the sword was called Autumn Drinker. Her Qingling sword was glowing with a green light and could cut iron like mud. It was rumored that Autumn Drinker was sparkling and translucent, like frost and snow. Autumn Drinker was now on Xiao Ju's waist. The sword was not out of its scabbard, so nothing could be seen. These wolves must have died under Autumn Drinker's sword. Since ancient times, treasured swords were given to heroes. Hien felt that she could be considered a hero. When she saw a treasured sword, she couldn't help but want to touch it. She quietly reached out and touched behind her back. Suddenly, she felt the body under her hand stiffen. Hien immediately let go and shouted, I didn't mean to touch your waist. I just wanted to touch your sword. After a while, she heard the angry voice of someone behind her. You don't have to speak. I'll be bored to death if I don't talk, Hien said. Commander-in-Chief, you don't have to be so serious. She said, Look, you killed so many wolves, but you didn't take them away. In the end, these wolves were taken advantage of by the foxes in the mountains. Not to mention the meat, the wolf's skin was the best. The fur of the one I killed was incomplete and could only be used to make boots. But the few you killed didn't damage their fur. It's enough to make a cloak. However, the wolf fur cloak doesn't suit you. Presumably, the material of your clothes is more precious. Why not let me take advantage of it? In winter, I have a wolf for cloak, and I can roll in the snow. Xiao Ju seemed to be confused by her nonsense. He actually continued her words, although his tone was not very good. He curled his lips and said sarcastically, "You like wolf skins so much. No wonder you didn't even let go of the dead wolf in the pit." "That's not it. I'm just too cold." Hien shook his head. "Governor loves cleanliness and doesn't like dirt. He can't tolerate the blood of animals staining his clothes. We're different. Not to mention dead wolves. I've even slept in a pile of corpses." After a moment of silence, Xiao Ju asked, "When?" "It was when I was young. I don't remember it clearly." Hien looked at the stars in the sky. "At that time, I had no choice but to save my life. So what if it was a pile of corpses? After all, I was the only one who survived." She thought that Xiao Ju would ask her what happened and was prepared to make up a story. Unexpectedly, Xiao Ju didn't ask, so her prepared story fell through. Hien's thoughts went back to the past. Not long after she arrived at the Mo County, a group of Fuyue army recruits encountered the Xichang people at the edge of the desert. They were all recruits and didn't know how to fight. They just relied on their blood. But their blood was quickly dispersed by the Xichang people's savagery. In the end, the small group of recruits was completely wiped out. Hien was also seriously injured at that time, but she didn't die. She hid under the corpses and still had a breath left. The Xichang people set the corpses on fire and left. At that time, Hien thought that she was doomed and would die in this desert. But God didn't let her die. It suddenly rained in the middle of the road, and the rain extinguished the flames on the corpses. Hien didn't have the strength to move. She didn't dare to move. She didn't even dare to cry. The young man who was fooling around with her yesterday was now a corpse that couldn't move. The brother who was scolding her in the morning was already decapitated. She lay in the wreckage and experienced the cruelty of war for the first time. She lay in the pile of corpses and smelled the blood. She cried all night with her eyes wide open. At daybreak, a passerby passed by. He buried all the corpses on the spot and helped them collect their corpses. He also found Hien, who was on her last breath, and saved her life. Later on, Hien thought countless times that although she was a man in the capital, she wasn't strong enough. In her heart, she probably left herself a way out. But after that night, she didn't leave herself a way out. She wasn't a girl. No one could wipe away her tears on the battlefield. The only thing she had to do was to survive every life and death battle. At any time, surviving was the most important thing. In order to survive. So, what if she had to stay with the wolf corpses? When necessary, if she really couldn't get out, she could eat the wolf meat raw. But Xiao Ju probably couldn't understand. Hien sighed softly in her heart. At this time, she really felt a little cold. The young man was wearing black clothes and black armor. Hien was a little afraid of dirtying his clothes, so she didn't dare to lean back. But she couldn't help but raise her head to look at him. From this angle, she could see his beautiful jawline. Xiao Ju was really good-looking. Hien couldn't help but admit this fact in both her previous and current lives. He was born handsome and heroic. Although he was indifferent, there was always a touch of laziness that made people's hearts itch. The most beautiful thing about him was his pair of eyes. They were clear and cold like autumn water. It was as if nothing in the world was reflected in his eyes. People couldn't help but think about how gentle his eyes would be when he looked at someone seriously one day. She also remembered when they were in the pit, Xiao Ju had stretched out his hand to her. Inexplicably, she thought, fingers as sharp and long as the bamboo shoots in spring, eyes as clear and jade green as the ripples in autumn. She felt that this description was indeed very suitable for this person. No wonder he was called Jade-Faced Commander-in-Chief. Thinking about it, she really couldn't accept it. They were both young generals. Why was he called Jade-Faced Commander-in-Chief, while she could only be called Masked General? Hien thought that if she had taken off her mask at that time, she might have been called Panin of the Army or something. She was still thinking about it, but she didn't know that she was looking at Xiao Ju's face with admiration one moment and sighing in disappointment the next. She looked like a lunatic. In Xiao Ju's eyes, it was really strange. It was also very stupid. Chapter 74. After crossing the mountain, the road became easier to travel. Xiao Ju started to trot on the horse. Hian fell asleep unknowingly. After some time, someone tapped his shoulder and called his name. Hian? She opened her eyes and saw Liang Jiao standing in front of her. She was still leaning on Xiao Ju and dozing off. There was a faint trace of wetness on the inside of Xiao Ju's sleeve. She wasn't sure if it was her saliva. Hian wiped his mouth and said apologetically, "I'm so sorry." Before she could finish speaking, the man had already dismounted from his horse, almost causing her to fall backwards. Xiao Ju said to Liang Ping, "I'll leave it to you." She didn't even look at Hian and walked away. Hian was speechless. Look, he didn't even give her a chance to thank him. Hian shrugged and Liang Ping helped her down from the horse. Green Ears was a good boy. After Hian left, he stomped his little hooves and went to find his master. Hian was covered in blood. Even though Liang Ping had a lot of questions, he couldn't ask them now. He only asked, "Can you still move?" Liang Jiao underestimated me. She smiled and said, "I'm fine." Liang Ping sighed and said, "Forget it. I'll send you back first and bandage your wounds. We'll talk about it later." Hian immediately agreed. In the room, Xiao Mai, Shi Tu, and the others were waiting. As soon as Hian entered, a group of people surrounded him and asked him questions.
How are you?
Are you okay? Are you okay? Why is there so much blood? Did someone die? Hian even saw Wang Ba sitting on a box in the corner. When he saw her, he seemed to want to go up to her, but in the end, he held himself back and snorted. "So you're not dead. Thank you, little brother." Hian already knew from Liang Ping that it was Wang Ba, who went to look for Shinhan. He blinked at him and said with relief, "Little brother is so concerned about me. Boss is very touched." "You." Wang Ba was like an angry cat. She jumped up from the box, glared at her, and walked away angrily. Before she left, she almost broke the door. Hian was helped to his bed and sat down. Shi Tu handed Hian a bowl of water. Hian finished it in one gulp and felt that his throat finally felt better. Xiao Mai said, "He go, your hand is bleeding. Hurry up and change your clothes." Hian coughed softly. "It's actually not that serious." "It's not serious?" Hong Shan frowned. "If military governor Xiao didn't go up the mountain to find you, would you still be alive tomorrow morning? You shouldn't try to be a hero." Jiang Jiao also came. "It's not worth it for that kind of person." "That's right." Huang Xiong pinched the prayer beads around his neck. "They should be fed to the wolves."
Hian.
She looked at the room full of people. For the first time, she realized that she was so popular. However, there were so many people that it was so noisy that her head hurt. In the midst of the chatter, someone pushed the door open and came in. Her voice was like an aureole. "You all can leave. I'm here to deliver the medicine." The room instantly became silent. Hian looked over curiously and saw the crowd automatically make way for a young woman to walk in. This woman was wearing a palace satin dress. Her long hair was tied up in a bun with a snow-white ribbon and a lotus jade hairpin. It was simple yet beautiful. Her jade-like face was light, and her eyes were bright. She was very beautiful. Even the mosquitoes in the Liangzhou guard station were male. They had never seen such an elegant and refined beauty. For a moment, these men were as silent as cicadas in winter. They were afraid to disturb this lovely fairy. Hian was confused. He only asked, "You are?" "I'm a doctor of the Liangzhou guards." The woman said softly, "Shinmuxue." Hian felt that this name was familiar, but he couldn't remember where he had heard it. Shinmuxue had already placed the bowl of medicine on the bedside. He turned around and said to the others, "Could you all please leave for a moment?" Hong Shan immediately blushed.
He said, "Oh."
He shouted and drove the others out. Before he left, he even gave Hian an envious look. "Hian, Hien asked, "Is this medicine for me?" Shin Mushua nodded. Hien picked up the bowl and drank it all in one gulp. Shin Mushua was stunned. He said, "Actually, you don't have to drink it so quickly." Hien scratched his head. "I have to drink it anyway." Shin Mushua seemed to be amused by him. She smiled and said, "Then little brother, take off your clothes first. I'll apply the medicine for you." Hien hesitated for a moment. He said, Miss Shin, you can just put the medicine here. I'll apply it myself." "You?" Shin Mushua shook his head. "Let me do it. You're still young and a girl." Hien advised her earnestly. "I'm a man. It's not good for you to look at me. There's no difference between men and women in front of doctors." Shin Mushua replied. Hien thought for a moment. "It doesn't matter to you, but it matters to me." Shin Mushua raised her head. Hien fearlessly looked back at her and said, "I have a fiancé. Miss Shin, my body can only be seen by my fiancé. My body is as clean as ice and as clean as jade. If you taint it, you have to take responsibility. Do you understand?" He wrapped his clothes tightly around himself. He looked as if he would rather die than submit. Shin Mushua had probably never seen such a shameless person. He stopped what he was doing and looked at her, not knowing how to react. "You can just leave the medicine here," Hien said. "I'll apply the medicine myself. I want to keep my body clean for my sweetheart. Don't harm me." He looked serious. Shin Mushua was speechless for a moment. She was finally defeated by Hien's shamelessness. She said, "The medicine and hot water are here. I'll go out. Call me when you're done." Hien nodded happily. "Thank you for your understanding." Shin Mushua left. Hien breathed a sigh of relief. She hurriedly took off her blood-stained clothes. She dipped a handkerchief in hot water and wiped her body. Then, she changed into a clean set of clothes. She rolled up her sleeves. Her elbow, which had been bitten by the wolf, was badly mutilated.
It was a horrible sight.
Hien took a deep breath. She changed her handkerchief and was about to clean the bloodstains on her wound. At this moment, the door was pushed open again. Hien was busy wiping her wound. He said without raising his head, "Didn't I say that you don't need to come in? I'll apply the medicine myself." A cold voice sounded. "You're really moved by your fiancé's chastity." Hien raised her head. Xiao Ju was standing a few steps away from her. She crossed her arms and looked at her calmly. Hien thought that it was a close call. Fortunately, she had moved quickly and changed her clothes. She squeezed out a smile. "Why is the commander-in-chief here? Don't tell me that you're here to settle the score with me? I've already said that I didn't touch your waist on purpose when we were on the mountain." Xiao Ju's expression froze. Her eyes were almost burning with anger. She raised her hand and threw a round object into Hien's arms. Hien picked it up and saw that it was an exquisite porcelain bottle. It looked like a mandarin duck pot. She pulled out the stopper and sniffed it. It was bitter and astringent. "This is medicine?" she asked hesitantly. That person said angrily, "Treat your own wound first." These words and this scene were inexplicably familiar. Hien was slightly startled. She looked at him again. He had just changed his clothes. They were neat and new. He stood there, looking majestic. The moonlight shone in from outside and shone on his tall figure. For a moment, it was as if they had returned to the past. It was the same. Chapter 75. When Hien was young, she wasn't as smart as she was now. If she were to look at her past self with her current eyes, she would feel that she was too slow. At that time, she wasn't very good at both civil and martial arts. She was about the same as Chung Li Su now. She could also be considered a good-for-nothing young master. However, unlike Chung Li Su, who had a powerful uncle to protect her, the He family wasn't considered much in the Xian Chong dojo. Therefore, she wasn't as likable as Chung Li Su. Moreover, when she was young, she always wore a mask all day long. She always looked out of place with everyone else. Because she had a guilty conscience, she never dared to hang out with the other youths to avoid giving herself away. After a while, she was ostracized by the other students of the Xian Chong dojo. The rejection of the youths came very directly. At first, they just didn't play with her. When they played Kuju, they didn't call her. Later, it became even worse. As for the reason, it wasn't a big deal. It was actually because she worked too hard. When Hien was young, he had a one-track mind. He grasped the principle of the clumsy bird flies first. He really started from being a clumsy bird. The worse the civil and martial sciences, the more he wanted to study. He studied more seriously than anyone else. Even though the teachers of the Xian Chong dojo felt that this child really wasn't suited for studying and practicing martial arts, they were often moved by Hien's persistence in studying. Therefore, they often praised Hien in class. Studying diligently is like a sprout in spring. It doesn't seem to grow, but it grows day by day. You all look at Hirufei. You should learn from him. They were all 14 or 15 years old youths. They had always loved to compete and win. It was fine if they learned from others, but why should they learn from Hien? Why should they learn from him, who was always last place even though he worked hard every day? Was there something wrong with his brain? However, the teachers seemed to like Hien very much. Anger rose from the hearts of the youths. Jealousy and disdain mixed together. They found the masked boy more and more unpleasing to the eye. Every 3 to 5 days, they would give Hien some trouble. Today, they deliberately cut Hien's clothes during the knife competition. Tomorrow, they would feed sneeze grass to her horse during horse training. Sometimes, they would deliberately poke holes in her boots. When she accidentally fell to the ground, they would let the stones cut her soles. Hien crawled up from the ground in a sorry state. The teenagers hid together and laughed at her. Hien was stupid when he was a teenager, so he couldn't complain to the teachers. The teachers didn't know what the students did in private. Hien had a difficult time. One day, it was winter, and the weather was very cold. When the young men were practicing their swordsmanship in the academy, someone splashed a basin of water on the ground. The water quickly froze on the ground. They urged Hien outside. Hirufei, hurry up, the teacher is calling for you. Hien ran out in a hurry, slipped, and fell flat on his face. That fall was very heavy. She only felt that she was seeing stars and couldn't get up for a long time. The few youths who were hiding in the corner laughed and said, "He really fell for it." Hien sat in the same place for a long time before she stood up. She pursed her lips and didn't say anything. The students of the Xian Chong dojo returned home once a month. The clothes she brought this month were not clean. She was teased every few days. Even immortals didn't have so many clothes. In this weather, the sun hadn't been seen for a long time, so it was hard to dry them. Hien spent the whole day wearing half-wet clothes. At night, she crawled out of bed. She didn't go to practice her swordsmanship. Instead, she ran to the main hall of the academy. Even a clay figurine had 3 points of temper. Moreover, she was the eldest young master of the He family, so she had a bit of temper. However, she still knew how to judge the situation. Those youths were tall and strong, and their skills were much better than hers. She couldn't beat them. Could it be that she had to let it go? Absolutely impossible. How could she vent her anger? The 14-year-old Hien thought for a long time and finally came up with a solution. It snowed at night. She wore clothes that were still wet and braved the wind and snow to fetch a bucket of water from the well in the backyard. She carried the bucket of water and ran to the main hall. She remembered where the group of youths sat during the day. She found their copybooks under their tables. This month, the teacher's homework was to copy the character training 5 times. Tomorrow was the end of the month when the homework was handed in. Hien splashed the entire bucket of water on it. The water instantly soaked the handwriting, turning it into a large blurred piece. Hien let out a sigh of relief. Her heart suddenly felt happy. After the happiness, a trace of nervousness floated up. She hurriedly stuffed the copybook back to its original position. She carried the empty bucket and hurriedly ran out. However, this was the first time she did this kind of thing. It was inevitable that she was nervous. At night, she didn't dare to turn on the light. When she walked to the door, she didn't look at the threshold under her feet. With a pop sound, she fell solidly. She was in so much pain that she sucked in a breath of cold air. She fell twice in one day, and this time was even worse. Her elbow hit the wooden splinter on the threshold, and a cut was made. Blood flowed out. Hee-yeon struggled to sit up. She raised her arm and thought to herself, is this what they mean by evil is doomed to destruction? She had only done it once, all right? The heavens were too harsh on her. No matter what, she had to quickly return the bucket. Bucket, that's right. Where was her bucket? She just remembered that she had fallen so hard. When the bucket fell to the ground, it should have made a loud noise and awakened everyone. Why was it still so quiet? Hee-yeon looked up in confusion. She stood up and walked 2 steps forward. She didn't know when someone was standing outside the door. He was lazily leaning against the wooden door with his back facing Hee-yeon. He was holding an iron bucket in his hand. It was actually Xiao Ju. For a moment, Hee-yeon was so nervous that she didn't dare to speak. He saw it? He didn't see it, right? Impossible, he must have seen it. He was still holding the bucket in his hand. But if he didn't see it, how could she explain it? Watering the flowers in the middle of the night? Hee-yeon's imagination ran wild. The young man saw her standing there in a daze. He raised his eyebrows and said, "Don't you feel pain?" Hee-yeon, His gaze fell on Hee-yeon's elbow. Because she had to draw water, she had rolled up her sleeves. On her white and tender elbow, there was a bloodstain that looked like an ugly embroidery. It was particularly obvious under the weak light of the lantern. Hee-yeon subconsciously wanted to hide her hand behind her back. The young man looked at her impatiently and said coldly, "Follow me." Hee-yeon didn't know why she listened to him. She was probably scared silly and followed him in a daze. Xiao Ju first put the iron bucket back by the well. He turned around and saw that she was still in a daze with her arm raised. He sneered and looked at her meaningfully. "You're so timid, and you're still doing bad things." Hee-yeon clenched her fists and didn't speak. She was very nervous. Usually, Xiao Ju only hung out with a few of his close friends. He wasn't close to the other boys in the school. Hee-yeon didn't know what this person was thinking. If he reported her, a cold pot was thrown into her arms. Hee-yeon looked down. It seemed to be a mandarin duck pot. The pot was exquisite and carved with complicated patterns. She heard her own voice, which was as soft as a mosquito. "What is this? You don't know how to use it?" The young man turned around and said lazily, "Medicine." Chapter 76. Hee-yeon held the mandarin duck pot in a daze. A voice pulled her thoughts back to the present. "You don't know how to use it?" She raised her head. A young man in a dark blue robe had already sat down on the stool in front of her bed and taken the pot from her hands. The mandarin duck pot had a secret mechanism. One pot could hold 2 kinds of wine, and it was an essential tool for poisoning people. He tore off a piece of white cloth and poured out a little bit, then a little bit more. The first thing that flowed out was the medicinal juice, then the medicinal powder. There was a small spoon embedded next to the handle of the pot. Xiao Ju took the spoon and slowly spread the liquid evenly. When he lowered his eyes to do this, his long eyelashes drooped down. The outline of his face was handsome, and there was a hint of youthful delicateness. It made people feel uneasy, and they didn't know whether they were in the Liang Province Guards or in the Xianchongguan thousands of li away. While Hee-yeon was in a daze, he had already finished applying the ointment on the white cloth and tossed it to Hee-yeon. His tone was extremely cold. "Do it yourself."
Oh.
Hee-yeon had already expected this. She muttered in a small voice, "I didn't expect you to help me." He heard her and stared at Hee-yeon with a half-smile. "I don't dare delay your chastity. It's good that you know." Hee-yeon smiled. "But I still have to thank you, Governor, for giving me such precious medicine. There is a shortage of medicine in the guard station, Unless you want to die, he said. He-Yan looked at him solemnly. You saved my life. I didn't expect the governor to be such a protective person. Xiao Ju sneered. I don't know what you're talking about. He stood up and left. He-Yan saw that he was really leaving this time. Only then did he lean against the headboard and sigh softly. Xiao Ju's medicine was very effective. It was cool and refreshing, and when he applied it, the pain lessened a lot. He-Yan looked at the pot, his thoughts drifting away. On that snowy night when he was 14, Xiao Ju was not as cold as he was now. At least, when He-Yan said, I don't know how to use it, he not only helped open the mandarin duck pot, but also personally applied the medicine for her. It was very strange. The scene at the time was already very blurry, but now that Xiao Ju was like this, the details that had been forgotten slowly unfolded in front of He-Yan's eyes. It was as if it had just happened, unbelievably clear. She sat on a stone bench in the courtyard. The usually lazy and indifferent young man was surprisingly patient as he applied medicine for her. His face was like a painting of his face. To the way. He-Yan was young at that time and had no resistance. He was defeated in an instant. After applying the medicine, he left. He-Yan whispered to him, Your medicine? It's for you. The young man casually replied, You're so stupid. You'll have a lot of chances to get hurt in the future. Keep it for yourself. His words came true. Later on, she had countless chances to get hurt. The ointment in the mandarin duck pot had long been used up, and the pot was later lost by her in a battle. Thinking about it, it was quite a pity. The next day, the young men went to the school. They found that the copybooks on their desks were wet with water. The handwriting was unrecognizable. It was a mess.
Who did it?
Come out. I promise I won't beat him to death. They roared fiercely. Isn't it simple? See whose copybook is clean. Look inside. We'll find the one who has a grudge against us. Someone offered a brilliant idea. He-Yan's heart tightened. He was very annoyed.
No wonder she said he was stupid.
He didn't even think of this. Her copybook was clean and tidy. After a little inspection, wasn't it him? Forget it. He had already done it.
He was a real man.
He dared to take responsibility for his actions. She steeled her heart and accepted her fate. She looked on helplessly as the young men asked the students in the school to take out their copybooks for inspection. They were almost in front of her. He-Yan gathered his courage and was about to stand up and shout, I did it. Suddenly, someone came in and slammed it on the table. This movement was too loud. Everyone looked over and saw a handsome young man in a white robe leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He had a lazy expression and said carelessly, I did it. There was an uproar. Brother Huijin, did you really do it? Someone asked carefully. Xiao Huijin was not He Rufei, who in the capital dared to provoke him. Xiao family could oppress people to death. Even the teacher had to protect him. The emperor had personally praised him. It was me, he answered righteously.
But why?
That person asked with a sullen face. There's no reason. The young man glanced at him and answered indifferently. My hand slipped. He-Yan couldn't hold back his laughter. Sensing everyone's gaze, he quickly turned around and acted as if nothing had happened. What happened later? Later, the matter was left unsettled. Because it was Xiao Huijin, no one dared to say anything. They could only admit that they were unlucky.
Creak.
The door was pushed open. Shun Mushua walked in. She took the empty medicine bowl and water basin away. She told He-Yan not to press on his wound before leaving. From the narrow window in the room, she could see the sky in all four corners. A bright moon hung in the sky, and the stars shone brightly. She muttered in a low voice. Today is Chinese Valentine's Day. She had never experienced such a festival. In the past, she dressed as a man. This kind of festival had nothing to do with her. Later, when she married Su Zhiheng, at the very beginning, she also looked forward to it. No matter how much she dressed as a man, when she put on makeup, she only wanted to be like an ordinary girl. She wanted to go to the riverside with her sweetheart to release flower boats, worship the immortal he, steam fruit, and go to the temple fair. She heard that there were fireflies on the mountain. She gathered her courage and asked Su Jiheng for the first time. Su Jiheng smiled and agreed, okay. But before Chinese Valentine's Day, she was blinded. As a result, this matter seemed to be forgotten. Su Jiheng didn't take the initiative to bring it up again. He Yan also didn't mention it. She thought that perhaps he was worried about her illness and didn't have the mood to talk about it. Until the next day, Ru passed by her door. She smiled and asked someone to put away the lantern Su Jiheng gave her the day before. She just found out that on Chinese Valentine's Day, Su Jiheng wasn't at home. It wasn't because of official business, but because he accompanied Ru to the temple fair. Life was full of different things. She didn't know how she was doing as a man, but she knew that as a woman, she was really terrible. Just as she was thinking, Hong Shan came in from outside. He saw the mandarin duck pot in her hand and joked, "Oh, our commander-in-chief gave you a Chinese Valentine's Day gift. What kind of good wine is it? Let Big Brother have a taste." Yan was stunned for a moment and suddenly laughed. Thinking about it now, this Chinese Valentine's Day wasn't too bad. She rode a horse with the man in the dreams of countless Dawei women. She touched his waist, rode his horse, walked through the mountain roads, saw the starry sky, and finally received a pot of spirit medicine for free. She didn't waste her life. Chapter 77. Zheng Xian and two new recruits were standing beside the practice field of the Liangzhou Guard. Seeing Xiao Ju approach, Shen Han hurried forward. "Commander-in-Chief, I heard that the person was found?" Shen Han asked. "Liang Ping is keeping an eye on him." Shen Han sighed in relief. Yan was currently under suspicion. If he suddenly disappeared, it might have been intentional. It was safer to keep suspicious people under one's nose. However, since the person had been found, it was time to consider another matter. Zheng Xian said that Yan crossed the mountain by himself. Shen Hong said that Yan crossed the mountain to save Zheng Xian. "Commander-in-Chief, what do you think?"
Shen Han asked.
Xiao Ju said, "Zheng Xian is lying." Shen Han paused. "There are hoof prints on the mountain path. I also found traces of a wolf cub falling to its death," Xiao Ju said. Yan was indeed saving someone. Shen Han's expression darkened. If that's the case, Zheng Xian and the others are not righteous. No matter how outstanding these new recruits were, once they entered the battlefield in the future, who knew if they would change sides at the last moment? Soldiers could die under the enemy's blade, but they could not die under the secret arrows of their comrades. However, Shen Han thought of another matter. If Yan's words are true, can she be cleared of suspicion? If Yan was someone who would disregard his own life for his comrades, perhaps he should change his view of her.
"No."
Xiao Ju's cold voice answered him. He killed a wolf with his bare hands in the pit on the mountain. This person cannot be underestimated. He raised his eyebrows. "I'm afraid he has secrets." Shen Han did not dare to say anything more. Although the Liangzhou Guard was thousands of li away from the capital, the situation was complicated. No one dared to lower their guard. Shen Han looked at Zheng Xian and the others. They were sitting far away. At this moment, their expressions were uneasy. Although Zheng Xian tried his best to remain calm, he did not know that his lie had been exposed. "Commander-in-Chief, how do you plan to deal with these people?"
Shen Han asked.
"They crossed the line and interfered with others. They have a sharp tongue and are unscrupulous." Xiao Ju's expression did not change.
Her voice was calm.
"For slandering the army, behead them." Shen Han's heart trembled. He bowed his head and said, "Yes." When Yan woke up the next day, the sun was already high in the sky. There was no one in the room. She sat up and stared blankly at the sunlight coming through the window. Yan asked. Curiously, "Mississippi."
Yan.
was surprised. He asked. Miss? He asked. Hien asked. He asked. Asked. This is today's medicine.
Take it first.
Shin Mushue placed the bowl of medicine on the small table in Hien's room. Yesterday, the governor gave you some medicine for external injuries. You can change it every 6 hours. Disappeared. Why didn't they call me? I told Liang Jiao that your body still needs to rest. It is not convenient for you to practice in the martial arts arena today. Shin Mushue replied. Hien responded and looked at Shin Mushue. This girl was only 16 or 17 years old. Her skin was like cream, and she was extremely beautiful. The most important thing was that she had a tranquil and leisurely temperament that made people feel comfortable in their hearts. Probably because Hien was looking at her, Shin Mushue frowned slightly. Little brother, is there something wrong? Nothing, Hien said. I just feel that Miss Shin looks familiar. I seem to have seen you somewhere before. Shin Mushue was stunned for a moment. Then she shook her head and smiled. I have never seen little brother before. I probably remembered wrongly. Okay. Hien scratched his head. Shin Mushue saw that Hien had finished drinking the medicine. She took the medicine bowl away and left the room. Hien did not know what to do. Fortunately, this kind of daze did not last long. Someone knocked on the door again. Who is it?
Hien asked.
A careful voice sounded. It's me. Hien was stunned. A head popped out from the door. It was Shun Hong. He did not know where he came from. His face was very pale, and his lips were purple. He was not as lively as he was when they first met. He limped in, not daring to look at Hien's face. He walked to Hien's bedside and said, I'm sorry. Hien already knew the ins and outs of the matter from Hong Shan. He said, It's okay. Didn't you tell them the truth? But I almost... Shun Hong's face was full of guilt. Hien could understand. Shun Hong had not experienced much before and was timid. She must have panicked after being threatened by Zheng Xian. She said, Am I not fine now? Shun Hong nodded her head silently. When you first came in, you walked a little strangely. Hien asked, What happened? I violated a military order and was beaten 40 times. Shun Hong said, In the future, I will be a squad leader. I will not go to the front line. Hien was silent. 40 times. No wonder Shun Hong's face was so pale. She was lucky that she did not die. What about the others? Zheng Xian and 2 others were beheaded in front of all the recruits. Shun Hong said with a pale face. Hien was not surprised. When she was General Fei Hong, she had heard of General Feng Yun's evil reputation. The discipline in the military was extremely strict. There was once a son of a high official who came to the Nanfu army to make a name for himself. But because he violated military discipline, he was ordered to be beheaded by the Xiaoju. At the time, the high official did not let it go and reported it to the emperor. In the end, the matter was left unsettled. Other people might say that the Xiaoju was cruel. But if it was not so, he would not be able to control the Nanfu army and would not have come to this step today. Actually, being a squad leader is not bad. Hien patted his shoulder. You have a gentle and kind personality. You do not dare to kill on the front line. Shun Hong forced a smile. She took out a bunch of things from her pocket and stuffed them into Hien's hand. Hien looked down. It was a bunch of pine nuts. You are a good person, Shun Hong stammered. I was too weak before. I let you down and almost caused you to lose your life. These pine nuts are for you. You eat them slowly. He stood up and limped out. As soon as he left, Hong Shan and the others came in and bumped into him. Shun Hong's face reddened and she left in a hurry. After he left, Hong Shan asked, What did that kid come here for? Probably to bring a bramble and ask for punishment. Xiaomai said, he go. Where did you get the pine nuts? Hien put the pine nuts on the table. If you want to eat it yourself. Why did you guys come back so early? The chief instructor said something today. Sure too opened his mouth. We do not need to run with weights in the next few days. What is it? Yan was puzzled. We have already stayed in the Liang Province Guard for an entire summer. Hong Shan grabbed a few pine nuts and said as he peeled them. The chief instructor said that he wants to select the best recruits to go to the vanguard. Yan raised his eyebrows. According to the time, it was indeed about this time. He said that in about 10 days, we will go to the mountains to fight for something. Fight for first place? Fight for the flag. Sure too continued his words. Oh, right. Fight for the flag. Whoever wins the most will be first place and may be selected to go to the vanguard. Hong Shan said as he chewed on the pine nuts. Ahigo definitely won't have a problem. Xiaomai rested her chin on her hand. Ahigo is so powerful. He will definitely get in. Yan smiled and shook his head. If it was only the vanguard, it was naturally nothing. However, if he wanted to enter Xiao Ju's 9 Flags Battalion, he was afraid that he would need to put in some effort. This was really setting up an arena. Those who were capable would win. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.